Chapter 67, Go East and Prosper. Bravos, 294 AC. Robb had been plagued by strange dreams for most of the journey. Not every night, but almost. In some dreams, he found himself wandering the city, chasing after Winifred. In others, he was deep in the woods, hunting, stalking his prey, and moving stealthily through the underbrush. He attributed these dreams to the fact that this was his first time sailing and his first time leaving the north. He also recognized that he missed both White Harbor and Winifred, and those feelings rang true. As they arrived in the city, Robb stared in awe as they sailed beneath the colossal statue of the Titan. Its sheer size was more than he could comprehend. How had they built such a magnificent structure? He was so surprised by the sight that he stumbled, nearly losing his balance when he saw a man's face emerge from a hole in the statue. Har. I felt the same way, lad. I was certain I was imagining it, Ser Wendell said as Robb regained his footing. There are men in there? Robb asked, looking up and trying to see where the man had come from. Aye, lad. Should anyone attack, you'd see more than just heads coming from those holes, Ser Wendell replied, pointing out the gaps to Robb. Up there, archers, oil, rocks, you name it, all ready to rain down on anyone foolish enough to assault the free city. Robb smiled at the thought of a ship attempting to attack this city, only to discover that the statue was more than just stone. He could easily imagine the stunned expressions on their faces when they realized the truth. Soon, they reached the docks. Ser Wendell pointed out various ships, strange vessels from Ibn and Et, carracks from Dorne, and more pinnish ships from the west, all bearing the Lannister colors. What's that? Robb asked, pointing to a longship. Ironborn, Ser Wendell replied, spitting on the deck. Why do you hate the Ironborn, Ser? Robb inquired, curiosity getting the better of him. For years, lad, they've preyed on the north. My family has suffered their attacks. I've lost kin to them, lost men. I've known for years. Speak to the Mormonts and the Karstarks, and they'll tell you the same. Never trust a Reaver, Robb. Never. Ser Wendell turned to speak with some of their guards. Robb leaned closer to the ship, noticing the men walking around it. Not one of them was smiling. They looked dirty and mean, and he shuddered at the thought of Theon. Was his friend like these people? Did he look up to these Reavers? Robb recalled some of the stories Theon had told, tales that seemed exciting, even glorious at the time. But looking at the man now, relieving himself off the edge of the longship, he seemed anything but glorious. When the men were ready, Ser Wendell ordered them to escort the group through the city. Robb stared in awe at every new sight, strangely dressed men and women, mummers performing in the streets, peculiar birds and animals, and, embarrassingly, women displaying far more of their bodies than he was accustomed to. They arrived at a large building, and Robb was stunned to see both the Lion of Casterly Rock and the Merman of White Harbor prominently represented on the door. Above the building, banners flew in the air, some he recognized as northern houses, while others he assumed were from the west. Be respectful in here, lad. Lord Kevin is a stickler for protocol, Ser Wendell said. Robb nodded as they entered. The room they walked into was a simple hall with a door and a large table. A man sat there with 2 guards, while other men occupied benches around the table. Ser Wendell laughed and joked with a gray-haired man, while another man disappeared through large doors at the back. Eventually, they were led through those doors as well, and Robb was astonished by what he saw. The building opened up to a small dock, where boats sailed by, filled with crates of wood and furs. Men were bustling up and down the dock, loading and unloading ships. Impressive, isn't it? Ser Wendell asked. Robb nodded in agreement. They were then brought to a large solar, where 2 guards stood outside, wearing Lannister colors. Inside the room, a man sat at a desk in front of another large door. He rose to his feet and greeted Ser Wendell warmly. You've returned, Wendell, he said. Aye, that I have. Is Lord Kevin inside? Wendell replied. He is, sir. And who is this? The man asked, turning his gaze to Robb. This is Lord Robb Stark, my father's squire. Robb, this is Jaddel, our man in Bravos, Wendell introduced. Jaddel laughed before extending his hand to Robb. Well met, Lord Robb. Is this your first time in Bravos? Aye, my lord, Robb answered. There's no need for Lord here, Lord Robb. You can just call me Jaddel, the man smiled. Robb, Jaddel, Wendell said, and Jaddel nodded before knocking on the door and entering the room. A few minutes later, they stepped inside, and Robb immediately recognized the man sitting at the desk as a Lannister. His blonde hair was starting to gray, and his green eyes confirmed Robb's suspicion. Sir Wendell, the man said, rising with a smirk. Lord Kevin, Wendell replied, shaking his hand. May I present Lord Robb Stark? He's squiring for my father. Robb moved forward, feeling nervous. My lord, he said with a bow. Lord Robb, Kevin said seriously, seemingly scrutinizing him. The examination lasted longer than Robb was comfortable with, and his anxiety grew. Lord Kevin finally said, and Robb glanced worriedly at Sir Wendell, who looked disappointed for some reason. Wendell muttered a moment later, and Robb's heart raced. What had he done? What had gone wrong? He felt his palms begin to sweat and his eyes darted around the room. Suddenly, both men erupted into laughter. Confused, Robb looked from one to the other until Lord Kevin reached over and ruffled his hair. Far too serious, young man. You'll never fit in around here like that. Come, take a seat. You both must be hungry after your journey. We'll have lunch in here, Kevin said, and Robb exhaled a sigh of relief. Robb let out a sigh of relief before glancing at Wendell, who was stifling a laugh. I don't understand, sir, he said. Your brother told us we needed to play a jape on you. He said you'd appreciate it, lad, Wendell replied, causing Robb to chuckle. It seems I owe John some payback, sir, Robb said with a grin. That's the spirit. Come on, let's eat. I'm famished, Wendell said as he took his seat. Robb found it challenging at times to keep up with the conversation between Kevin and Wendell. They exchanged tales of lands he had only just begun to read about, Qohor, Mantaries, openings in Volantis, and the slave cities. Slaves? Did he hear that correctly? He would need to discuss this further with Sir Wendell, surely they weren't involved with slavery. By the time they left for the manse belonging to House Manderly, darkness had settled over the city, and Robb was captivated as Bravos transformed into a different kind of vibrant life. Over the next few days, he attended meetings, observed the trade deal being negotiated, and took notes, which Sir Wendell praised as good suggestions. They dined with the Sea Lord, and Robb met a man who introduced himself as the first Sword of Bravos, Syrio Farrell. Robb was thrilled when Sir Wendell arranged a lesson with him. You'll learn more in 1 hour from that man, Robb, than in a moon of training with Sir Marwyn, Wendell assured him, and Robb eagerly anticipated the next day's lesson. He woke up early, broke his fast, and nearly spent the entire morning practicing while waiting for Syrio Farrell to arrive. When he finally did, Robb was surprised to be taken indoors to spar. Why would we fight indoors, sir? Robb asked, puzzled. Syrio looked at him as if he were losing his mind. Sir, I am not one of your knights in their steel dresses. I am the first Sword of Bravos, Syrio Farrell. Now, what is my name, boy? Syrio Farrell, Robb replied. And yours? Robb Stark, he said. The man smiled slightly. Well, Robb Stark, Syrio Farrell will explain. Indoors or outdoors, it's all the same, fighting comes when it comes, and this I know. He then tossed Robb a wooden sword. Wood? Robb asked, surprised. When you can manage that, you can have steel. Not before. Now, shall we dance? The man's grin caught Robb off guard. For the next 2 hours, Syrio dominated him. Every move Robb attempted was countered effortlessly, and every blow he tried to land was parried. He had thought he had improved under Ser Marlin, but fighting Syrio felt like battling Jon all over again, and his frustration grew with every defeat. Dead, Syrio declared, his blade resting at Robb's neck. Dead, he repeated, this time at Robb's chest. Really dead, he said, pointing the blade at Robb's head. In some ways, Robb was relieved they were using wooden swords. Had they been using steel, he knew the aches he would feel the next day would be even worse. I'm tired, he finally admitted, reaching his limit. Good. Tired is when the fighting happens. I don't want to do this anymore. Will you say that when the god of death comes knocking, Robb Stark? Will you tell death that you are tired and don't want to do this anymore? No, there is only one thing we say to death. Syrio picked up the sword and locked eyes with him. Not today. In Pentos, 294 AC, Daenerys had spent almost a week watching the Fat Magister's house. When she finally saw him, they wheeled him out in some contraption, and her breath caught in her throat. Her brother was alive. She almost jumped from the hill they sat on, nearly running to him. But when she saw Sandor smile, she stopped herself. Instead, she looked closer and saw the Fat Magister bowing to her brother. It seems cunts live too, Sandor remarked, and despite herself, she laughed. What's going on with them, do you think? Fucked if I know. You were the one who spent time with that bastard of a brother. You know what usually happens when you stay with one of these rich fools. Sandor said, tossing aside the apple he had been eating. They parade us around, making it seem like we're important, like we're their friends. But it's just for their entertainment. Then, when Viserys gets all entitled, they throw us out. Cunts, Sandor added, his disdain evident. Like that fat bastard over there, Daenerys said, pointing at Illyrio. Sandor chuckled. Aye, just like him. They watched as Viserys berated some servants. No, not servants, she had discovered they were slaves, though none were called that. Daenerys noticed Sandor tense up as some riders approached. Studying them carefully, she didn't recognize them, but Sandor did and smirked. Who are they? She asked. They're one of the groups looking for us, the ones who attacked when we first met. See the two at the end? That's the leader, I think. She focused on them. While she, like Sandor, didn't care they had escaped, seeing her brother in that chair, knowing they were the ones who had put him there, ignited a fire within her, demanding revenge, demanding justice. I want them dead, she declared. Sandor looked at her and nodded. As you command, princess. I want to help, she insisted, and he nodded again. Leaving the hill, they made their way back to their small rented house, choosing it over a tavern. Daenerys was eager to uncover why this fat man seemed so interested in her. Now, seeing Viserys there, her eagerness grew. Her feelings about her brother were shifting. Sandor was right, Viserys was a jerk. She knew that now, but he was still her brother. She would free him from whatever the Magister had planned, then send him on his way. She was relieved he was alive, but she also understood his nature, even pain hadn't changed him. Once they arrived back, she sighed. It was her turn to cook. Although she enjoyed it and found it fun, Daenerys wasn't in the mood for it, but she pushed through. The meat was cooked just right, and while she didn't care much for the vegetables, Sandor insisted she eat them. What's this? She asked. Dinner, he replied. She sat down and quickly began to eat. This is meat. Yeah, isn't it tasty? She said, licking her fingers as the juices slid down her hand. Sandor grumbled but eventually started eating too. She smirked, enjoying the sight of him grousing as he emptied his plate. Despite his complaints, he smiled while drinking his wine. He had once given her a taste, but she found she didn't like it at all, preferring water or the berry juice that was so popular here. Once they finished, Sandor told her to take a nap, as they would have a busy night ahead. She lay down with her dagger under her pillow and her sword resting on the small table. "Come on," he said, waking her up. Though it was dark outside, she felt like she hadn't slept at all. "A few more moments," she murmured. "Get up, you lazy sod," he said, kicking the bed and rousing her fully. She opened her mouth to protest, the words on the tip of her tongue. "Don't even think it, dragon girl," Sandor warned. She reached for her sword, but he pointed to the bow instead. Taking the bow and her dagger, they made their way through the city. The tavern he brought her to was familiar, but the speed at which he led her there suggested he had been searching for them. "They're inside. You set up over there. When they see me, they'll come running," he instructed. "Why don't I go in?" "It's me they're looking for," she suggested. He smiled, reaching out to mess with her hair. "They won't recognize you with that." Although her hair was slightly longer now and still dyed black, she had edged it in red. She was a dragon, after all. "Right, be careful, Sandor," she said, and he nodded as she took her bow and positioned herself. It didn't take long for the night to unfold. He stumbled up the street, pretending to be drunk, while 4 men followed closely behind him. As he passed by, she stood up and began to fire. The first arrow struck true, killing the man instantly. For her second shot, she deliberately aimed for another man's leg. Sandor was already dispatching the 3rd man when the 4th moved in behind him. She lined up her shot, hitting him squarely in the throat just as Sandor turned to face him. "He was mine," Sandor growled. "You're too slow, I win," she replied with a chuckle as they walked toward the man she'd injured earlier. "Who are you?" he asked, clearly not recognizing her. "My friends call me Danny, but you can't," she said, prompting a laugh from Sandor as he dragged the man to his feet. "Careful, you don't want to anger this little dragon," Sandor teased, and the realization dawned on the man's face. "Princess, princess. All I was trying to do was help. I brought your brother to Illyrio. He wants to help you," the man stammered, his voice cracking. "Why?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "I don't know. He just does," he replied, and she shook her head. "No, why?" she pressed, and he looked at her in confusion. "Princess. Why, if all you wanted was to help, did your men hurt my brother? It was an accident. We didn't mean to." "You killed the one who did, they paid for it," he insisted, glancing at Sandor, who stood there looking bored. "Not all of them," she said, her knife moving swiftly in her hands. The blade slid up through the man's chin, and when she pulled it out, he crumpled to the ground. "Why the hell did you let him talk so much?" "Just kill him and be done with it, that was the plan," Sandor said as they walked away. "Plans change," she replied. "For heaven's sake," he laughed, shaking his head. The next morning, they woke to break their fast on eggs and bacon. It was Sandor's turn to cook, so she packed her things while he prepared the meal. Once they finished eating, they gathered everything they owned and left the small house. As they walked through the city, she caught sight of. Sandor stood, staring at a massive ship. Danny had never seen anything like it before. A part of her wanted to go closer and take a better look, but they had things to do. As they arrived at the manse, she noticed the slave soldiers standing with their spears. She glanced at Sandor, who spoke to one of the men, and then they waited. A few minutes later, they were ushered inside. When one of the men tried to take their weapons, Danny shook her head. Instead, more guards came to escort them further in. Eventually, a stout man waddled into the room, his belly shaking with each step. He looked at her in confusion, but his expression changed as he seemed to recognize Sandor. "Magister Mopatis?" Danny asked, feigning ignorance. "I am. And you are?" he replied. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, Princess of Westeros. I believe you've been looking for me and my friend, she said, and the fat man smiled. Meanwhile, in Essos, Jon Cunnington was grappling with a significant headache. The knowledge that Viserys was currently recovering in Illyrio's manse weighed heavily on him. On one hand, Viserys was the brother of his prince and the uncle of his king. On the other, he was a potential threat. Illyrio had informed him that Viserys claimed to have been crowned by his mother. This, combined with the boy's belief that he was the last dragon, would complicate matters, especially once he discovered Aegon. With Aegon demanding to meet his uncle as well, Jon found himself in a quandary. Illyrio had his own plans for Viserys, and while Jon might not agree with them, they did present opportunities. When Illyrio had first told him, Jon had been furious, filled with disgust at the very idea. But the more he thought about it, the more he began to realize it might be for the best. What do you mean she crowned him? Jon asked. His mother crowned him when Rhaegar fell. He also mentioned something about Aerys removing Rhaegar from the line of succession, claiming he was the true dragon, Illyrio said, taking a large bite of food. Did he? Jon asked, his curiosity piqued. What? The stout man replied, momentarily distracted by the arrival of new dishes. Did Aerys remove Rhaegar? Jon pressed, aware that if that connection was severed, Aegon's claim to the throne would become even more complicated. Illyrio chuckled softly. He shouted it from the throne every so often, along with many other things. Varys would tell me. There was a hint of sadness in Illyrio's voice at the mention of Varys, and Jon noticed he paused his meal for just a moment. Did he write it? Did he send the letters? Jon asked, frustration creeping into his tone. No, he did not. So like many of the things the Mad King said, they're just words in the wind, Griff. Jon sighed in relief, but his mind quickly shifted to what they would do with Viserys and how they would handle him. What is your plan, Illyrio? Griff, I have many plans. Illyrio laughed, reaching for the freshly served roast duckling and taking a hearty bite. Illyrio, what is your plan with Viserys? Jon's temper began to fray. He will die, Jon. The only question is when. Illyrio took a sip of wine, and Jon felt a deep unease settle in his stomach. Wasn't it his duty to protect Rhaegar's kin? Shouldn't he be doing something to safeguard them? Yet, the voice he found himself listening to most insisted that Viserys was a threat, too much like his father, and that it was Daenerys they truly needed. Aegon would understand, Jon thought. In fact, if handled correctly, it could inspire him. How? I haven't decided yet. He lives until we find his sister. After that, I'll figure out a way that benefits us the most. And young Griff? Jon inquired, and Illyrio smiled. We'll never know the truth of things. As Jon shook the troubling thoughts from his mind, he watched Duck and Aegon spar on deck. Septa Lamore was immersed in her books, while Halden read his own, and he mentally prepared himself for what lay ahead. Jon was prepared to deny Aegon the right to see his uncle. The reasoning was straightforward, it was too dangerous. The usurper's men were too close, and the risk to both their lives was too great. He smiled as Aegon landed a hit on Duck, seeing that small grin on his face felt like an arrow straight to Jon's heart. My prince, my silver prince. Did you see, Griff? Did you see? Aegon asked, smiling wider as he moved closer. But then the smile changed, and Jon found himself shaking his head. I saw. You keep getting better. Soon you'll be taking victories, is that not right, Duck? It is. He improves every time we fight. It'll only be a matter of time now, Duck replied, placing the swords back where they belonged. Come, we must speak, Jon said to Aegon, leading him down to their cabin. Is it about my uncle? Can we go visit? Will it be soon, Griff? Aegon's excitement was palpable, his eagerness to meet his kin shining through. It is. Come, Aegon, Jon said. A few moments later, they were in their cabin. Aegon sat facing him as Jon poured himself another glass of wine. We cannot go, Aegon. I know you wish to meet your uncle, I do too. But for now, we cannot. He is my uncle. He and my aunt are the only family I have left, Jon, Aegon insisted. Jon felt his heart ache. Was he not family? Was the boy not like a son to him? You will always have family, Aegon, but for now, your safety must take precedence over your wishes. I am the king, Jon. I order you to take me to my uncle. I want to go now. No, Jon replied firmly, and Aegon glared at him. You can't tell me no. I'm the king. Aegon argued. That is true, and when you reach your majority, no one can tell you no. But we are not there yet, Aegon. You may be king, but I act as your regent. It is the law of the land you will one day rule. You must understand that, Jon said, watching as Aegon's demeanor deflated. I do understand. I know. I just wished to see my family, Jon, Aegon replied, tears starting to fall. Jon held him in his arms, feeling the boy sob against his shoulders. It broke his heart to deny him. Had Daenerys been there with her brother, Jon doubted he would have had the strength to refuse. But she was the true prize, the true dragon. With Daenerys and Aegon united, the loyalists would rally to their cause. A good king and queen, that was what the realm needed. Jon had no doubts about at least one of them being true. When Aegon had calmed down a bit, Jon smiled as Aegon wiped his eyes, embarrassed to have cried in front of him. He looked at Aegon, who tried to muster a smile, and there he was again, his silver prince, his life. That night, they sat down to dinner. Aegon and Duck laughed and joked, while Lemore chatted with Halden. As they ate and laughed, Jon found himself drawn more and more to the wine. He drank far more than he should have, thinking he should be drunk, thinking he should be happy. Yet tonight, he found it hard to be either. The voice in his head started as a whisper, but soon it grew louder. He excused himself from the table, nearly stumbling to the deck on his hands and knees. You were never my friend. You were never my friend. My blood, Jon. They are my blood. He shook his head as he retched, remembering how he had always considered him a friend, his closest friend, his confidant, his truest and most loyal man. He would put his son on the throne, no matter what it took. That would prove it, wouldn't it? That would silence the voices in his head, wouldn't it? My silver prince. My life. My love. Pentos, 294 AC. When the guard came in and told him who was at the gate, Jon could hardly believe it. It had to be a lie, there was no way it could be true. It couldn't be this easy. There was no way she would just come to him after everything, the coin he had spent to find her, the lives her dog had taken. The thought that they would both simply arrive at his gate and walk into his home seemed impossible. But it turned out it could be that easy. The girl in front of him was far different from what he had expected. Her hair fell just below her neck, black with red-tinged edges, the colors of her house. She wore a sword and carried a dagger, her clothing more suited to a boy than a girl. If it weren't for her eyes and the imposing man beside her, he might have laughed at her mummery. The hound was every bit as intimidating as he had heard, almost 7 feet tall, his burned face unmistakable, and his eyes seemed to take in everything around them. Illyrio had over 30 unsullied as his guards, yet as he looked at this man, he realized that while the guards might be enough, he still wasn't safe. He needed to be clever, to judge when and where to deal with this threat, and it was clear that now was not the time. Princess, it is good to see you. Please, you and your companion should sit. Do you wish for food or drink? I shall have it brought to you immediately, he said, rising to his feet and moving toward the door as they took their seats. Master? One of the Lyseni girls called as he left the room. Food and drink for my guests, now. Move, girl, he ordered, and she scurried off to obey. He walked in search of his steward and found him working in his solar. He called the man over and ordered him to ensure that Viserys didn't leave his room. The prince was to be guarded until he said otherwise. Once that was settled, he called for Red Ant, the captain of his guards. When the Unsullied arrived, he instructed him to ensure all guards were on duty, then headed back to the room. The princess was sitting there, neither she nor the hound eating, both scanning the room. He watched her for a moment, taking in the scene. The girl's eyes were fierce and predatory, reminiscent of a lioness alert to her surroundings. No, not a lioness, a dragon. He smiled as he entered the room. Aegon would do well with this girl as his queen, indeed. Forgive me, my princess. I had matters that required my attention, he said, his smile widening as he took his seat. More than I, Magister. I find it surprising, given how much effort you put into finding me, she replied, her gaze locked onto his. Indeed, it's true. I wished to find you most urgently, my princess. Once I learned where you were, I sent my men. Why did you not come with them? He asked, deliberately avoiding a glance at the imposing figure seated beside her. People have been trying to kill me and my brother from the moment I was born, Magister. They succeeded with Viserys, she said, sadness creeping into her voice as tears began to fall. He couldn't help but smile inwardly at her strength. I will make sure they do not succeed with me, she declared, wiping her eyes. I have no wish to see you harmed, princess. Far from it, your safety is what I seek to ensure, he reassured her. She looked at him, her eyes filled with hope. It is? Of course, princess. Yours and your brother's. Then you failed in that, since it was your men who killed him, the hound interjected angrily. The princess's brother is very much alive, Sandor Clegane, he said, enjoying the surprise on the hound's face at his knowledge. My brother lives? Take me to him. I need to see him, the princess implored, her voice shifting from firm to desperate. He rests now, princess. It wouldn't do to wake him, but I can have you shown to him if you like. Yes, please, Magister. I would like that very much, she responded eagerly. He nodded to one of the Lycenii slaves to fetch his steward. The hound watched him suspiciously, but his focus remained on the princess, captivated by her determination. Her brother's survival had lifted her spirits. Gone was the fierce dragon, replaced by a quiet, hopeful girl. He could use both sides of her, but it was reassuring to see that the dragon was merely a front, a facade. He couldn't allow her to be too much of a dragon, otherwise, his own dark creature would be overshadowed. He smiled as he watched her eat, and even as the hound did the same. This was workable. There was no doubt that the man had to go, but he had time to draw the princess even closer to him before that happened. Perhaps when she learned the truth about Clegane, it would play to his advantage. He could encourage her to send the man away of her own accord. He had hoped that mentioning the name would spark something in her, but the princess seemed distracted. Still, it meant she didn't truly know who the hound was, which was a benefit for him. After a few moments, his steward entered the room, and the three of them, he, the princess, and the hound, walked to Viserys' chamber. The prince lay sleeping, the drops he had mixed into his food working their magic. Without them, he would rant and rave and be far too troublesome. Your brother, princess, he said as she rushed to the bed, taking his hand in hers, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Magister. Thank you. I am in your debt, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Think nothing of it, princess. I am always happy to serve the rightful heirs of Westeros, he replied, his smile genuine now as he thought of Aegon. In Pentos, 294 AC, Oberyn found it far easier to bring Doran on board than he had expected. His brother was more calculating than he was, but his sister's letter had won him over immediately, and it had evidently done the same for Doran. They spent another 2 days in the water gardens, with Tyrion poring over the Maester's journal while Oberyn indulged in his own pleasures. You will talk, Caliot. Before I send you to whatever it is you people believe in, you will talk. You think you scare me, little snake? I'm part of something far bigger, far more dangerous than you slippery sliding things, the Maester spat. Do you know why I'm called the Red Viper? Oberyn replied, as he began to coat his blades with the various poisons he had brought along. Ha, poisons? You think in your short time with our order we allowed you to study the truth, the Maester said, his tone dripping with arrogance. What makes you think I learned that there, Maester? Oberyn countered, watching the man's expression shift. The last poison he prepared was the most lethal, his own concoction. A blend of the long goodbye and tears of Lys, he had found a way to prolong the agony, ensuring that Caliot would linger for quite some time. If he closed his eyes, he could almost hear the man's screams echoing in his mind. You look happy, my love, Illyrio said, her naked body entwined with his. I am, my love, very much so, he replied, leaning in for a kiss. Rising, he moved to grab a drink, gently nudging a boy aside. They had arrived a week prior, and while Tyrion spent his time poring over the journal, he and Illyrio had returned to the brothel they knew best. The boy was from ET, but the girl's origins were a mystery to him. The night had brought no rest for Oberyn, and now his body ached, he needed to spar. After dressing, he stepped outside to find Daemon and Oberyn deep in conversation, his guards ready to leave at his command. Daemon, escort Illyrio back when she's ready. Come, Oberyn, I find myself longing to use my spear, he said, watching his daughter smile as they began walking down the streets of Pentos. This place was not one of his favorites. He preferred Lys, the great grass sea, Norvos, Cohor, and Volantis, each more appealing than here. In Oberyn's eyes, Braavos was one of the greatest cities in the world. But Pentos felt dull and boring, and he hoped they wouldn't have to linger for long. When they arrived at the tavern, he and Oberyn headed inside. Oberyn stepped outside, re-emerging moments later with their spears in hand. Ready, father? Oberyn asked, her face radiating determination. Always, daughter, he replied, twirling his spear with ease. They moved together, Oberyn's influence evident in Oberyn's improved technique, though her impulsiveness remained a challenge. In a fight, being rash could be an asset, thinking on your feet and being explosive had their merits. However, it was far better to plan ahead, to devise a strategy, and to be prepared to adapt when necessary. The goal was to make others fight on your terms. One day, Oberyn might grasp this lesson, but not today. Instead, Oberyn chose to impart the harsher truth. He would teach her what happened when one failed to learn. He taught her about pain. Humiliation didn't affect Oberyn, pain did. She needed to experience the consequences of her recklessness, to understand the stakes. So, he struck her repeatedly, never fully delivering the blow, but enough for the winces to be clear, enough for her to comprehend. We are done, he said, taking her feet out from under her. No, we can go again, father. Oberyn, we are done. Come sit with me. He motioned for a girl to fetch some drinks for them both. What did you learn, my child? He asked as they sipped their wine. Not to fight you early in the morning, father, she chuckled, rubbing her arm. What else? He prompted, laughing along with her. That I need to slow down, to back off, to draw my opponent in first. Only then should I strike, she said, looking at him eagerly. Then and only then, he affirmed, leaning in to kiss her forehead. He smirked when she wiped it off, her expression suggesting that the affection unsettled her, but he noticed the small smile that appeared when he turned away. You left me there, he heard Illyrio say a few moments later as she approached, pretending to be hurt. You looked so happy, my love. Besides, that was hours ago. You must have found a way to keep you occupied, he said, and she rolled her eyes. It was supposed to keep us occupied, Oberyn. They entered the tavern to find Tyrion breaking his fast. Joining him, they all began to eat while Tyrion sat quietly. You find out anything? Oberyn asked. Tyrion shook his head. Your maester was a dull man. Oberyn nodded. So, no new names? One or two, but odd choices, Tyrion replied, glancing at him. In what way? Small houses, blackwoods and brackens in the riverlands, Waynwood in the Vale, and some names I don't recognize. Which names? Otar and Cates, Tyrion said, and Oberyn shook his head, having never heard of those men. We should ask Marwyn. I don't know House Waynwood, but the Blackwoods and the Brackens both share blood with the dragons, don't they? They do. Wait, Otar and Cates, are they with the Velaryons? Tyrion asked, suddenly panicked. No. Montford's maester has been there since his father's days. He's an old man now, a Celtigar bastard, I believe, Edwell Hill. How do you just know that? Tyrion laughed. What can I say? I know things, Oberyn replied, chuckling. I'm not just a pretty face, my friend. We need to speak to Montford, and Raymond Derry too. I doubt either would send messages or speak to their maesters about what they know, but we still need to talk to them. We will, Tyrion. So, any luck finding our friend? No, but I did hear some interesting news, Tyrion said, leaning closer. Apparently, one of the magisters in this city has been searching extensively for the Targaryens, offering quite a large reward to find them and bring them to him. A man named Illyrio Mopatis. You think we should pay the magister a visit? Oberyn asked. You, perhaps, Tyrion suggested, and Illyria, who had been quietly listening, turned to them both. Should I not go change first? She asked sweetly. A smile formed on his face as he thought of Pentos in 294 AC. The Hound. How he managed to keep his expression steady during Dany's performance was beyond him. The way she played her part, especially with the tears, was a nice touch, he thought. He could see the gears turning in the magister's head, the delight he felt at the turn of events evident on his face. Even the magister's little attempt to manipulate Dany into turning against him was amusing to watch. But he had his own role to fulfill. He waited patiently until Dany was safely in her room before asking to see the magister. Handing over his weapons was irritating, but thankfully, he had more stashed away, and Dany had some too, along with a few hidden nearby in case they were needed. He glanced at the two guards standing with him, pondering how quick they might be. He knew they wouldn't be intimidated by his size and strength, they would simply do their duty. As the magister regarded him and the guards nodded, confirming he was unarmed, he noticed the man relax. A smile spread across the magister's face, clearly thinking he held the upper hand. Why have you come to see me, Clegane? The magister asked. What are your plans for the princess? He replied, his concern for the girl evident from the start. To help her and her brother reclaim their throne, of course, the magister said, the smile on his face making him wonder how long it would take to knock out each of his teeth. You know who I am? He questioned. I know a lot about you, Clegane. Your brother. Oh, I know exactly who you are. What do you intend to do about it? He pressed, his worried tone only serving to widen the magister's smile. That depends. What are your plans for the princess? To protect her, he stated, and the magister nodded. Why? She reminds me of someone I lost, he admitted, deliberately shaking his voice. Who? The magister pressed. It doesn't matter. Who? He insisted. So, he shared the story of his sister, feeling frustrated yet again by the magister's smug expression. She doesn't know who I am. I don't want her to, he said, struggling to maintain his composure. Damn tear to fall. Damn dragon girl has me beat, he thought, laughing to himself. It's an interesting predicament you find yourself in, the Magister said, but I sense you wish to look after the princess. Since that is my own wish, I think we can work together, for now. For now? The Hound asked, raising an eyebrow. For now, I wish to see just how trustworthy you are, Clegane. Should I find you lacking, then the princess will need to know exactly who you are. Illyrio watched him closely, waiting for his reaction. The Hound gave him his best panicked look and noticed the smile that crept across Illyrio's face. He then stood up and walked slowly to the door, letting his shoulders sag to appear as beaten as possible. Once outside, he received his weapons back and was escorted to his room. Lying down on the bed, he smirked. The dragon girl was far too clever for the likes of Illyrio Mopatis. We need to get in there, Sandor, she urged. With that many guards? It'll be tricky. No, it won't. He's looking for me. All we need to do is walk to the gate. Are you out of your mind? About as mad as you are, she replied, and despite himself, he laughed. He won't let me in, he said. Before she could respond, he added, certainly not let me stay. He will if he thinks he owns you. No one fucking owns me, he snapped. I know, she said, her smile calming him somewhat. What I mean is, men like him, from what you've told me, like to believe they own people, that people are mere tools for them. So be a tool. Give him what he needs to think he owns you. What? He asked, confused. Half-truths. Make him think you care. Make him think you're worried you'll be sent away. If he knows the truth about who you are, make him think I don't. It had worked well, he felt, though the inevitable problem with her brother loomed ahead. He hoped she was ready for that. If not, he hoped she would be soon, as he drifted off to sleep. The next morning, they shared a quiet breakfast, grateful for the solitude. Soon after, the Magister summoned him. As he sat in the room waiting, he pondered what lie would be spun for him this time. Ah, Sandor, she calls you that, yes, the Magister inquired, and he nodded in response. Good. His Grace, the King, is awake and eager to meet his sister. I would like you to be there. Of course, Sandor replied. His Grace can be temperamental, Sandor. He may come across as a bit rough with her, perhaps even aggravated at times. Then I'll gut him, Sandor retorted. No, you won't, the Magister said, his tone and expression turning serious. I won't allow him to harm her. His voice softened. He is the king and will act as kings do. If you wish to stay, you must accept that, yes? Silence hung in the air for a few moments as Sandor kept his head down. Finally, he turned to look at Illyrio and nodded, which brought back the grin he despised on the fat man's face. His thoughts shifted to Dany. She played her role exceptionally well. The excitement she displayed upon hearing she could see Viserys seemed entirely genuine, even though he knew it was an act. They were led to a room where Viserys sat in a wheeled chair, dressed in the colors of his house. A smile broke across his face when he spotted Dany, but it quickly faded into a frown as he turned his angry gaze toward Sandor. Who is this scarred monster? Viserys demanded, his voice high-pitched and already grating on Sandor's nerves. This is Sandor. He's protecting me, Dany said proudly, but Viserys glared at her. Your hair. What did you do with your hair? You're a princess, not a whore, he exclaimed, and it took all of Sandor's restraint not to intervene as the boy tugged at her hair. Please, you're hurting me, Dany pleaded. You are a Targaryen, sweet sister. Act like one, or you'll wake the dragon. I will. I'm sorry. Please, my king, I'm sorry, she said, tears streaming down her face. Sandor struggled to contain his anger. Magister Illyrio will see us on our throne, sweet sister. Thank him for me, Viserys said, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "Thank you, Magister," Dany replied, and Viserys smiled, as did Illyrio. Over the following weeks, Sandor observed the unpredictable nature of the prince. At times, Viserys was almost brotherly toward Dany, but on other occasions, he was far from kind. They couldn't find the materials to remove the dye from her hair, so it was allowed to grow longer before being cut. At that moment, it barely measured a couple of inches, but Viserys seemed pleased that the silver strands were finally showing. Illyrio appeared increasingly pleased with something, perhaps Dany's seeming return to the meek girl she had once been, his own inaction, or even the way the prince fawned over him. As for Viserys, Sandor thought he was insufferable, and if given the chance, he would gladly see him dead, though he knew Dany would never allow it. On the evening of their first full moon there, a delivery arrived. Sandor had no idea what was in the chest, but Dany seemed eager to find out, almost chasing after it when it arrived. He watched as it was locked away in a room, and he saw the key handed to Illyrio and placed around his neck. It took a few more days before Dany sent him on errands, and even then, he was only allowed out under guard. "It's a fine evening, is it not?" He heard her voice in his room and turned to see her standing in the corner. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "The Magister is eating again, and my brother is drunk." "Can you do this for me?" she asked, handing him the key. "Where? How?" he replied, confused. "I was so upset when my brother hurt me today, when I woke the dragon," she said with a snort. "So upset that the Magister allowed me an embrace, or maybe it was because I'm growing up, and he had another reason to hold me in his arms," she shuddered. He did his best, making imprints in the clay as he listened to her. He handed the key back to her, trying to push aside thoughts of the Magister's touch as she embraced him once more. Then she was gone, and he lay down, reflecting on the week it took to have the key made, and another week to find the right moment to see if it would work. They would need to wait for the perfect time before leaving this place and these people behind. Pentos, 294 AC, Dany felt a mix of uncertainty and frustration. She couldn't decide which of the two was more deluded, her brother with his dreams of being crowned, of crowds chanting his name, of loyalists flocking to him, swearing fealty, or Illyrio, who filled their heads with stories of women sewing dragon banners and men meeting in secret, raising toasts to their future king. Her brother soaked it all in, while she sat quietly, forcing a pleasant smile. The reality, as Sandor had told her, was starkly different. He spoke of her father, the rebellion, and the true sentiments of the people. There were no secret toasts, no dragon banners, and certainly no army waiting for her brother's return. All that awaited her in Westeros was Robert Baratheon and whatever fate he had in store for her. Given what he had allowed to happen to her niece, nephew, and their mother, it was a future she dreaded. For now, the only person she could truly rely on was Sandor, her loyal protector and friend. Together, they were against the world, and she had faith that the world would soon realize just how outmatched it was. So, she played her role, biding her time, allowing the Magister to touch her when he embraced her sober, and even more so when he was drunk. But she had taken the key and returned it, and he had bought her act as truth, as if she could ever be worried about a broken dragon. "Come, sweet sister, sit with me. Let me tell you of our plans," her brother hiccuped. She smiled and nodded at the Magister, who looked at her with a strange expression. At first, she feared he had sensed her returning the key, but as she watched him adjust his robe, a wave of disgust washed over her. He had been aroused, by her, a girl. Maybe she should just let Sandor gut him and be done with it. "Tell me, brother," she said, forcing the sweetest smile she could muster. She listened as he rambled on about wolves, lions, and stags, weaving tales of revenge he would never be able to deliver. The following morning, she was summoned to the Magister's room, where she was informed that they would not be allowed outside for the foreseeable future. Baratheon men had arrived, and their safety was of utmost importance. But Dany could sense when a man was lying. It was easy when you knew what to look for. With some, it was simply every time their lips moved, like with Illyrio. As you say, Magister, I am most grateful, she replied, her painted-on smile just another disguise she wore daily. Thank you, Princess. I shall see to the men myself. I may be gone a day or two, he said. She smiled, relieved that he was leaving, and excited about the opportunity this presented. When she saw Sandor that day, she briefly feared that the Magister would take him with him, leaving her alone. They hadn't planned much for that scenario, other than where to meet if they got separated. Thankfully, the Magister didn't take Sandor, and the next day, he set off, some of his guards accompanying him, making their job easier. Your brother? Sandor asked that night in her room. What of him? What do you want to do with him? Nothing. Is that wise, Princess? Whatever he is still my brother. He can stay here, we don't need to see him again, but I won't harm him, she replied. Sandor looked at her for a moment before nodding. Still, she knew that leaving him here, especially with what she was planning, would cause him trouble. The more time she spent with him, the less she recognized the brother he had once been. He was increasingly petty, prone to screaming and shouting, and even more eager to hurt her. The dragon awoke every day, and she had the bruises on her arms, legs, and sides to prove it. No, he could rot here for all she cared, but she wouldn't harm him herself, nor would she allow Sandor to be sullied by it. She had gotten as friendly with the guards as anyone could, learning who they were and what they endured. It shocked her, but it also presented an opportunity. For now, though, all she could focus on was the room and the chest. What do you think is in the chest? She asked Sandor. I don't know, gold, he replied. It's not gold. Whatever it is, it's far more valuable, she said, smiling as the idea took shape in her mind. She felt drawn to it, dreaming of it, picturing it vividly. Whatever it was, she wanted it. No, she needed it. And for some reason, it needed her. The first night the dreams came was frightening. Voices called to her, Mother, find us, free us, wake us. All other sounds faded away, leaving only those haunting calls. A part of her feared it was the madness that had taken her father, the same madness she was sure was claiming her brother. But it only happened at night or when she was near the room with the chest. So, she had stolen the key, bided her time, and tonight she and Sandor would see their plan through and escape this place before Illyrio returned. She didn't trust the man, she didn't believe him. The way he looked at her, the way he had touched her, no, this man was not a supporter of her family. She and Sandor tried to figure out the odds, but with him here, it was so much harder. They would return one day to deal with him, but for now, they had to seize the opportunity before them. Are you still asleep, dragon girl? Sandor asked, breaking her thoughts. She smirked as she got up from her bed. No, just a mummery. Come on, let's do this, she said, grabbing her bow while her sword and dagger hung at her hips. The steward was asleep, the wine he'd drunk while the Magister was away doing its trick. Servants. The guards were less alert than usual, though the Unsullied remained as vigilant as ever. Thankfully, Illyrio seemed more concerned about his own safety than theirs, which meant there were only 2 guards, one stationed outside her room and the other outside her brother's. They moved swiftly through the dimly lit halls, approaching the door where the 2 guards stood, half asleep. Sandor raised his bow, but then shook his head. Instead, he walked up to them and, with a swift headbutt to one and an elbow strike to the other, both men were soon sprawled on the ground. She rushed to Sandor, snatching the key from him, and began to fumble with the lock. For a brief moment, it wouldn't budge, but finally, with a satisfying click, the door swung open. Sandor dragged the guards inside as she stepped into the room. Do you see this? She exclaimed, her eyes wide. Sandor smirked as he grabbed a pouch filled with precious stones. We could take it all and never look back, if it weren't for that bloody chest you want, he replied. But her focus had shifted entirely to the chest, and all she could hear was a distant noise. Moving closer, she opened the chest, and both she and Sandor gasped at the sight within. This treasure was far more valuable than anything else in the room. The eggs, turned to stone, lay inside, each one worth a fortune. "Well, it looks like we're rich," Sandor said, but once again, her attention was elsewhere. "Mother, wake us," she whispered, reaching in. The black egg in the center captivated her, along with the green and gold ones, but the black one held her gaze the most. She touched it, feeling its warmth and the movement inside. "Mother." The voice was happy and content. As she closed the chest, Sandor lifted it up, and they moved quickly outside. The next day, they kept moving, not stopping to rest or eat, just pushing as far away from Pentos as they could, heading north into Andalos, anywhere but here. When night fell, they made camp. After finishing her meal, she found herself drawn to the chest once more. She took the eggs out and lay down on the ground to examine them. As she fell asleep, she held them close, feeling their warmth against her. In no time, she drifted into a dream filled with fire and blood, the thunderous roar of dragons echoing around her. In her dreams, she soared through the skies, flying freely. Chapter 68, The Dragon Must Have Three Heads. Highgarden, 294 AC. Olenna sat in her solar, reflecting on Margaery's name day celebration. Everything had gone as well as she had hoped, and the gifts were truly remarkable. The one from Jon stood out, a drawing so precise that Olenna marveled at how he managed to create it so small. Sansa's gift had also surprised her. It took a moment to recognize the outline of the white wolf embroidered into the fabric. But amid the enjoyment of the feast, there were moments that irked her, particularly the arrival of Renly Baratheon. It took her only an instant to understand his intentions, her son's usual lack of subtlety making it painfully clear. Why he thought she would tolerate such an intrusion was beyond her comprehension. Was he really that foolish? The thought almost made her laugh. Of course he was. The next morning, she waited for her son, Mace, and then for the stag. She intended to confront both of them before addressing the other individual who had nearly spoiled her enjoyment of the feast, Randyll Tarly. The only reason she hadn't called him out for his behavior the night before was her plans for his son. The boy may have been overweight and craven, but the way his father treated him was simply unacceptable. "Mother, you wished to see me?" Mace said, smiling as he entered the room. "Take a seat, Mace," she replied, her voice leaving no room for doubt about her annoyance. "Mother," he said, his voice shaky as he settled into a chair. "What were you thinking, Mace?" "Mother?" he asked, as clueless as ever. "Renly Baratheon, Mace. Don't think I don't know you invited him." Mace? "I wished for him to meet Margaery, Mother. To see her, perhaps in time, once she is older, of course, a match could be made." "He is the king's brother, after all," he said, glancing at her. "What did I tell you? Mace, we will not be considering a match for Margaery with that family, am I understood?" "But Mother, they are the royal family. I thought you wanted a match with them." "I was just trying to help." "How close is Renly to his brother, Mace?" "To Joffrey? He brings us no advantage whatsoever, none." "Storm's End? Do you really think I'd send Margaery to Storm's End?" She watched him mumble something under his breath. "What did you just say?" she asked, glaring at him. "Better than marrying my daughter to a bastard," he replied. She might have admired the way he looked at her if she weren't so annoyed. "Jon Snow is perhaps the most advantageous match any lady could have, Mace. Given what that boy has already accomplished and what he could achieve in the future, there is no one in this land more advantageous. Do you understand?" He shook his head. "I will not marry my daughter to a bastard, Mother. I draw the line there, and I won't be moved on this." She almost laughed. She knew there was a backbone in there somewhere, but she never would have guessed this was the hill he'd choose to die on. "Neither would I, Mace," she said, watching his confused expression. "I don't understand," he replied after a moment. "Indeed, but that's beside the point. I have a match in mind for Marjorie, one that I'm sure you'll approve of. Do you believe me?" He nodded. "I do, Mother. I just worry, but yes, I believe you." "Then you won't try this again?" "No, Mother." She smiled at him. "Nor will you raise any objection to Jon Snow spending time with Marjorie, will you, Mace?" He looked at her, confused again, but nodded as he got up to leave. She longed to tell him the truth, to confide in him. Olenna knew how he'd react. He'd be overjoyed at the idea of Rhaegar's son, the thought of Jon himself. Not to mention the dragons. It was a thought that lingered in her mind, but she knew he could never keep it to himself. With a sigh, she settled back, waiting for Renly Baratheon to arrive. Something felt off about his impending visit, and she was determined to uncover the truth. Her wait wasn't long. When Renly entered, she took a moment to assess him. His brother was a fat, drunken whoremonger, and the other a stern, humorless man. Renly, however, had a certain charm. He was well-dressed, articulate, and carried himself with confidence. In another life, had it not been for his questionable tastes, he might have been a suitable match for Marjorie. But her rose was destined to bloom much stronger and reach far higher than the Lady of Storm's End. Not long ago, Renly had requested to take Loras as a squire, shortly after she had decided to send him to Jaime Lannister. Now, considering what she had learned about Jon Snow, she was relieved she had turned down that offer. But now, she needed to uncover who, besides her foolish son, had been whispering in Renly's ear. Someone certainly had been. "My lord, please take a seat. Would you like a drink or some refreshments?" she said, her tone as charming as she could muster. "Thank you, my lady, but I've been well taken care of." "Just some water, perhaps," he replied, and she signaled to her servant to fetch it. Once the servant returned, she turned her attention back to Renly. "I was surprised to see you come all this way for my granddaughter's name day, my lord." "Really, my lady? I would have expected Lord Mace to inform you of my visit," he said, a half-smirk playing on his lips. "He did, my lord, but I was referring more to the fact that you came at all, not just your arrival. The Reach and the Stormlands share borders, my lady. I believe we should seek to foster a closer relationship over time." "As do I, my lord. It would certainly be beneficial for us. But your presence at my granddaughter's name day feast hardly seems like an occasion worthy of the Lord of the Stormlands, especially when we are likely to have another celebration soon. Will there be a tournament at some point in the future?" she asked. "Normally, it would not, my lady. However, I found that I had both the time and inclination, and your granddaughter is such a charming girl. I have long wished to meet her." She studied the smile on his face and the way the words rolled off his lips. Someone was definitely pulling his strings, but who? "I am most pleased you came. Perhaps we can discuss some trading opportunities between our two regions, my lord?" "I would very much enjoy that, my lady. However, it seems I must cut my visit short. Events are forcing me to travel back to Storm's End. Perhaps I can have my steward draw up a proposal, or you can present one of your own." "Of course, my lord." "Then I shall keep you no longer. I wish you a safe journey home, Lord Renly." "I thank you, my lady, both for the welcome and for the opportunity to speak more in the future. I look forward to it." As he left, she felt a surge of annoyance. Her probing had yielded nothing. Renly was not that skilled at the game. If he were, she would have heard of it by now. No, someone was definitely pulling his strings, and Mace had played right into their hands. She would need to speak to Willis, perhaps even consult the Lannisters on this matter. But for now, it was time for lunch, and she hoped Lady Melissa would be agreeable to her plans. At Highgarden in 294 AC, Sam marveled at the library, which was so much more expansive than their own. The sheer number of books was mind-boggling. He had come here after breaking his fast, relieved that his father was busy sparring with Dickon and others. However, he couldn't even imagine where to begin. They wouldn't stay long, another day or so, and then it would be back to Hornhill. So, the larger volumes were out. As he moved through the aisles, he picked up book after book, replacing ones he had chosen with others that drew his attention. There were books on the stars, on sailing, on metalcraft, but it was the books on history that he found most fascinating. Surprisingly, they had books on the Gardener Kings here, as well as volumes on the other houses. Sam found himself surrounded by a wealth of books, particularly captivated by those on the Targaryens. He picked one up, then put it back, unsure of which to choose. Suddenly, a voice called out, "No, Fawn, come back." He turned and gasped, instinctively stepping back as he faced what seemed like a monster. "Please, don't eat me," he exclaimed, falling to the ground in fright. "Fawn, come here," the voice said more firmly now, and the wolf moved away from Sam. "Are you well?" the voice inquired. Sam looked up to see a tall young girl standing there, her hand resting in the wolf's fur, keeping it in check. He glanced from her to the wolf and back again, shaking his head in disbelief. The girl then turned to the wolf and said, "See, Fawn? That's why you shouldn't run off on your own. You've scared him." "I'm sorry, my lord, I've been rude." "What's your name?" "Sam." "Samwell Tarly," he replied. "Sansa Stark, my lord," she introduced herself. "Lady Sansa, forgive me," he said, struggling awkwardly to his feet. "No, my lord, it was my fault." "Well, Fawns," she said, giving the wolf a reproachful look. "What's that you're reading?" "A History of the Conquest, written by Maester Orlas," he answered, noticing her interest in the book. "It's a good book. My brother read a copy just recently," she replied. "Your brother is here, my lady?" he asked, eager to meet another reader. "No, John is in Casterly Rock," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "John? Jon Snow is your brother?" Sam connected the dots quickly. "Aye, he is," she confirmed, looking at him as if challenging him to speak ill of her brother. "I met him once in Oldtown, along with his wolf." "Wait, is Fawn, is she one too?" "She," Sansa corrected. "Is she a dire wolf too?" "Aye, she is," Sansa replied with pride. Just then, Marjorie entered the library. "Sansa, there you are. I wondered where you'd gotten off to." "Ah, I see you've met Sam." "Lady Marjorie, forgive me, I meant no harm," Sam stammered, flustered at the sight of the rose of Highgarden. "It's quite all right," Marjorie reassured him with a warm smile. "All right, Sam. So, what are you two up to?" Marjorie asked, a smile on her face and an eyebrow raised. "We were just talking about John," Sansa replied, her pretty smile lighting up her features. "And dire wolves," Sam added, prompting a laugh. He was taken aback when Marjorie took a seat, and Sansa followed suit. Looking between them, Sam felt uncertain whether to sit down or leave. But with Fawn nudging him toward the table and the girls encouraging him to join them, he found he had no choice. He was surprised by how eager Lady Marjorie was to engage in conversation with him. He knew she was friends with John, and considering they were talking about him and Ghost, perhaps he shouldn't have been surprised after all. He could have happily spent the entire day there, as both Marjorie and Sansa seemed far more clever and well-read than he had expected. Unfortunately, a servant arrived with news that his father was looking for him. After saying his goodbyes, he made his way to the guest wing, steeling himself to face his father. Upon arriving, he felt a wave of relief to see his mother waiting for him, alongside Lord Willis, whom he had liked during their brief conversations. "Ah, Samwell, it's good to see you again," Lord Willis greeted him. Sam smiled and nodded back. You too, my lord, he replied. Samwell, come take a seat. Lord Willis has some news he'd like to share with you, his mother said, while his father glowered at both of them. Samwell, my grandmother and your mother have been discussing your future. It seems you're more inclined toward knowledge than swords. Is that true? Lord Willis asked. Sam glanced from his mother, who nodded and smiled encouragingly, to his father, who was decidedly not supportive. I am, my lord, he answered, hearing his father snort in response. Perhaps that should inform your choices then? Lord Willis suggested, as Sam felt a growing confusion. Choice, my lord? Lady Olenna has graciously offered to sponsor you to go to the Citadel, Sam. If you wish, you could study with the Maesters and perhaps even become one yourself. Day, his mother said, her smile beaming now. A Maester? Him? The Citadel? This had to be a dream, right? Any moment now, he expected to wake up and find he'd been hit over the head during a spar or had fallen off his horse like the last time he attempted to joust. His father wouldn't approve of this, surely. Sam glanced at him and saw the disapproving look in his eyes, confirming his fears. But it had to be a possibility, didn't it? Otherwise, Lord Willis wouldn't be here, and his mother wouldn't be smiling. I think I'd like that very much, Sam said. His father stood up and walked out of the room. I shall inform my grandmother, Samwell. I'm sure she'll be most pleased, Lord Willis said before leaving a moment later. Sam turned to his mother, needing to know the truth. Was this real? Would he actually be allowed to become a maester? His father had refused his request to be sent there, insisting it was no place for a man, especially not for a son of his. But something had changed. What it was, he didn't know, but he was grateful for it. Mother, is this true? He asked. It is, if it's what you wish, my love, she replied. Sam nodded vigorously. It is, mother. It very much is, he said, wrapping her in a hug. She smiled at him. That night, dinner was awkward. His father made snide comments about how a real man wields a sword or lance, not books. He insisted that knowledge, unless it pertained to fighting battles and being a lord, was useless. Sam refrained from pointing out that his father relied on Arden for most things, or that Jon Snow had demonstrated just how valuable knowledge could be. His brother seemed happy for him, though Sam wasn't sure if it was due to his own happiness or because he now knew he'd be inheriting Hornhill. Still, he chose to give him the benefit of the doubt, hoping his brother cared enough about him that it was the former. The next morning, he met with Lady Olenna. Although he felt scared to be in the room, given how intimidating she usually was, he found himself feeling more grateful than nervous. I hope you enjoy yourself while you're there, young man. Gather as much knowledge as you can. Who knows, maybe someday you can help us as we've helped you, Lady Olenna said warmly. Anything, my lady. Anything I can do to thank you for this opportunity, I would be more than eager to, Sam replied sincerely. His father had wanted him to be sent off immediately, but his mother wouldn't allow it. So, he returned to Hornhill, where he spent some precious time with his sisters and got to say a proper goodbye. A few weeks later, as the carriage pulled away, he noticed the escort of men accompanying him was more a reflection of his father's standing than a real concern for his safety on the journey. He looked back at his home, wondering when he would return. Memories flooded his mind, his mother, his sisters, and Dickon before he became wrapped up in their father's world. He realized he would miss the people, not the place, he would miss the family, not the keep. That was the main difference between him and his father. His father cared for the family name, for how they were perceived, for Hornhill and their lands, but never for the family who lived there. Sam knew his father wouldn't even notice he was gone, he wouldn't spare him a thought while he was at the Citadel. But for now, at least, he found that he didn't mind. At Casterly Rock in 294 AC, Sam was given a room far better than any he had ever stayed in. He ate better than he ever had, except for the rare occasions when someone else treated him, and even received coin to buy new clothing. But none of that compared to the experience of training alongside the others. Watching Loras wield a blade was incredible, and witnessing Brienne and Cregan spar was mind-blowing. His own skills were lacking, he had never trained or wielded a sword before. He knew he could use a dagger if necessary and seemed to have some talent with a bow. But with a blade, he felt awkward and uncomfortable. If it hadn't been for Ser Daeron and Loras, he might have walked away. The knight was patient, never raising his voice or losing his temper. Jon just showed him how to hold the sword properly and gave him simple exercises to improve. Loras even took the time to spar with him using wooden swords, demonstrating how striking a training dummy could help him develop his skills. In the few weeks since his arrival, Sam had transformed from a completely useless swordsman to a terrible one, and finally to someone who was just average. Despite this progress, he still felt like he wasn't improving until Jon showed him how easy training could be. He learned to focus on observation rather than just attacking or defending, how to simply watch and replicate. Look at Loras, at Brienne. Pay attention to their feet, their stances. Watch how Cregan moves. Then, when you're on your own, try to match it. Try to be like them, Jon advised. But I won't be able to be like them, Sam replied sadly. No, but by trying, you'll end up being more like yourself, Jon encouraged. So, Sam took that advice to heart. At night in his room, he stood in front of a mirror and practiced movements, stances, twists, and turns. He moved forward and backward, and during training the next day, he applied what he had learned. To his surprise, he managed to land a few hits. The sight of Loras smiling at him or Jon patting him on the back filled him with a sense of pride he never knew he could feel. He started to observe more closely, Ser Daeron, Ser Walder, Ser Jorah, Loras, Brienne, and Cregan, all of them had their own unique styles, and he began to adopt elements from each. But watching Jon move was something else entirely. His twists and turns, his spins, the way he seemed to be there one moment and gone the next, it was awe-inspiring, not just for Sam but for everyone. How does he do that? Sam asked Loras. I wish I knew, Loras replied with a laugh. There was no doubt that Jon was ahead of them all. Cregan, Loras, and Brienne were so evenly matched that it was hard to predict who would win each day, but Jon could take them all. So, when Sam sparred against Jon and managed to win, he sensed something was off, something wasn't right. Jon wasn't speaking, and if he wasn't talking to Loras, he certainly wouldn't be talking to Sam. His other lessons were more educational, and while Sam could read and write and had some knowledge, he still felt out of his depth. Learning alongside Cregan and Joy was, he thought, somewhat embarrassing, though he realized they were both far ahead of him too. Cregan really shouldn't even be here, but they were studying the houses of Westeros, and on that topic, Sam was almost as clueless as Satin, almost. A red stallion on a golden shield, Liara asked. House Bracken, Joy answered when neither Sam nor Cregan could respond. Tell me something interesting about their house, Liara prompted, and this time it was Cregan who spoke up. Igor Rivers, Bitter Steel. He was a Bracken, Cregan said, earning smiles from both Joy and Liara. A flock of ravens on a scarlet field, surrounding a black shield and a weirwood, Sam said, surprising everyone. House Blackwood, Liara confirmed. Very good. Now tell me something interesting about them. Blood Raven, he was one of them, Sam replied, noticing the curious glances from Joy and Cregan. He didn't mention how he knew this, how an old woman in the Undercity would recite that rhyme each time he visited, or how he found it intriguing when a couple of boys came to the brothel wearing that sigil and asked one of the acolytes about it. Instead, he simply enjoyed their excitement over his learning and left it at that. While he didn't have page or squire duties here, he, along with Brienne and Cregan, did act as squires for the three knights. Unsurprisingly, Brienne gravitated toward Ser Walder, and Cregan found himself drawn to his uncle. Satin ended up working for Ser Jorah, which sometimes meant he got to follow him around, though he was never allowed into his quarters, nor was Brienne permitted in Ser Walders. "Come on, Satin, you must come," Loras said, breaking the monotony of cleaning armor. "Why can't someone else go with you? Brienne is in lessons, Cregan is spending time with his mother, and Jon is, well, Jon is." "Loras? What? It's nothing. Come on, you know you want to." Loras laughed, and he couldn't help but agree. Riding would definitely be more fun than this. "Fine, then at least you can help me finish." He smiled as Loras picked up a cloth and the breastplate, quickly getting to work. Before long, it was all done, and they headed down to the stables. He still chuckled at Loras's horse's name, Bluebell, though he kept the laughter to himself now. Loras hadn't appreciated it when he laughed out loud before. They mounted up, and with Loras's guards, they rode out of the gates of Casterly Rock. He was still new to riding and getting comfortable, knowing he wasn't nearly as skilled as Loras. Apparently, Joy and Jon were even better, but he enjoyed it and was grateful for the opportunity to learn. They rode over some hills to a small stream, then dismounted to let the horses drink. He watched as Loras tossed a stone into the water, noticing that he seemed troubled about something. "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's Jon. I don't know, something is bothering him. He won't tell me, won't tell anyone. I wish Marjorie were here." "Your sister?" "Why?" "Marjorie, Jon would tell her," Loras replied, a soft smile on his face. "Maybe you should write to her, let her know." Loras shook his head. "Are you mad? She'd be back here as soon as she could." "No, I can't worry her like that." "Is there anyone else who could talk to him?" Loras shook his head again. "Never mind. Come on, let's head back." He nodded in agreement. They rode back slowly, almost as if Loras wasn't eager to return. He wondered about the relationship between them. Jon and Loras wondered if they were like him. But it seemed that Jon and Loras's sister had an interest in each other, leaving Loras unsure of where that left him. It made him reconsider the glances he had noticed Loras giving Jon. If they didn't mean what he had thought, then what did they mean? When they dismounted back at the stables, he tried to push it out of his mind, even as Loras walked over, smiled, and placed an arm on his shoulder. Despite his efforts, he couldn't shake the thought. Loras thanked him for listening before walking away, and for the rest of the day, Satin struggled to forget it. Was Loras like him? Did Loras like him? At Casterly Rock in 294 AC, Jaime found himself busier than ever. With Tyrion away and Daisy's pregnancy entering a more challenging stage, he had his hands full. If he had been less occupied, perhaps he would have noticed Jon's mood sooner. If he could have had his morning sparring sessions instead of staying by Daisy's side, maybe he would have picked up on it earlier. While he didn't feel guilty for being with his wife, he was frustrated with himself for not recognizing how quiet and subdued Jon had become. Jaime had initially written it off as Jon simply missing Marjorie. He understood that feeling all too well from his own separation from Daisy in the north. While Jon might still be unaware of his true feelings for her, something Daisy disagreed with, he would still miss her and be upset about her absence. It was others who had pointed it out to him, and that realization only added to his annoyance. "Have you spoken to Jon much lately?" Jenna asked. "We speak every day." "About what?" "Plans, the ice trade, bringing the Valerians and the Derrys into our deals, many things, and..." "About Jon?" she pressed. "What do you mean? Does he talk to you about himself? About what's going on? What's going on with Jon?" Jaime asked, concern etched on his face. "I don't understand," came the reply. "Something's bothering him." Jaime sighed. He had tried to talk to Jon, but each time, he was brushed off. "I'm fine," Jon had insisted, and Jaime had accepted it, believing him. But then Arthur approached him, followed by Melisandre and Loras, all echoing the same sentiment. Something was troubling Jon, something he wasn't sharing with anyone. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Jaime spoke to Walder, Jors, and even Obara, who spent the most time around Jon and his sister. He thought it might be related to her or the other dragon that seemed to occupy Jon's thoughts. "I'd rather not say, my lord," Sarella replied when he questioned her. "Why not?" Jaime pressed. "I'm somewhat in his confidence. If he found out I had been speaking about him, about things he does in private, I'd rather keep it to myself," she explained, shaking her head. "Sarella, do you think I ask this out of curiosity? I'm worried about him. Loras is worried, my aunt, Ser Arthur, Walder, and Jors, we're all concerned." "I am too, my lord," she admitted. "Why?" he pressed further. "When he's not out sparring or with Joy or in his lessons, when he's not talking to you, he's quiet, very quiet. He barely speaks to Rhaenix when I'm there, and not at all to Lygaron." Jaime felt a surge of annoyance. "How long has he been like this?" "More than a week, my lord." "I don't know exactly," Sarella replied. "What else has he been doing?" Jaime asked, his worry deepening. "The candles, my lord," she said softly. "What about them?" Jaime inquired. "When I leave, he goes for them. I left some notes there and went back for them, and he was looking at them. I couldn't see what he was doing, but he was definitely looking." After their conversation, Jaime walked back to his room. Daisy was lying on the bed, her hand resting over her belly. The new maester had arrived just a few days ago, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply amiss. Jaime's first instinct had been to send him away, but when the man mentioned his name, Jaime felt a sense of relief. Daisy seemed to like him too, and the news he brought excited both of them. The baby would be born within the next moon or so. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting down on the bed beside her. "Good for now." "What's wrong?" "Jon. There's something going on with him, something he's keeping from all of us, even me." "How long?" she asked. "What?" he replied, his mind drifting for a moment. "How long has he been keeping it from you?" "More than a week," he said. "Spar with him tomorrow. You know how he gets." "Spar with him," she advised, and he nodded in agreement. "Do you need anything?" he asked, leaning forward to kiss her. "I'm hungry," she admitted, blushing. "Blame it on the cub," he teased, and she laughed as he left to get her some food. Highgarden, 294 AC, Willis observed the girl, realizing she was far smarter than he had initially imagined. She was naive, that much was certain, but he knew his grandmother and Marjorie were already teaching her. The first time he walked through the gardens with her, showing her Highgarden's flower beds and plants, she had strolled alongside him, almost dreamily, captivated by the beauty of his home. He could understand that, he too appreciated the splendor of this place. Now, however, she walked around with a newfound appreciation for the labyrinth, recognizing how the keep embodied beauty while also revealing its defensive nature upon closer inspection. When he pointed this out to her, he expected her to dismiss it, but instead, she seemed pleased that they were safe here. As for her dire wolf, while it wasn't as large as her brother's, according to her, it was still quite impressive. He had tried to picture Ghost in his mind but found that Fawn was now his point of reference instead. He had been worried about the wolf and his hounds, especially his hawks, but the wolf seemed to ignore any concerns. Sansa seemed indifferent, which put him at ease. "Did you enjoy the feast, Sansa?" he asked, watching her frown briefly before breaking into a smile. "I did, Willis," she replied. "Sansa?" he prompted, and she smirked, looking away. "Not all of it," she admitted. "Come, let's sit, and you can tell me about it," he suggested, noticing a seat nearby. He appreciated these moments during their walks. With his injured leg, Sansa was always eager to sit when he suggested it, making their conversations flow more freely. "So, what bothered you?" he asked. Who said anyone bothered me, she replied, and he noted that she referred to a person rather than a specific incident. Who was it, Sansa? Perhaps if you tell me, I can ensure they don't come to the next one, he said, smiling as she laughed. All of them, she responded, laughter spilling from her lips. There was more than one. They were just being foolish, as if she'd ever. Sansa huffed, then covered her mouth, blushing. I'm sorry, I shouldn't assume. Gossip. You have gossip, he said, inching closer. I love gossip. Tell me, he whispered, and she giggled. I shouldn't. Sansa, he pressed, looking directly at her. Marjorie, all those boys asking her to dance, thinking she'd want to dance with them, as if she would, Sansa said. Willis pondered her words, wondering if it was simply a case of jealousy. I'm sure some asked you too, he inquired, and she met his gaze. What? Oh, they did. I don't mind them asking me, but I know Marjorie didn't want to dance with them or listen to them. I saw it with the king's brother. Lord Renly. I know Marjorie didn't want to dance with him or the others. They're just foolish boys. Marjorie doesn't like any of them, she said, leaving Willis puzzled. What did she mean by foolish? Boys? What was she thinking? It took him a moment to process it all, but once he did, a smile spread across his face. It was true then, Marjorie felt something for Jon too, just as his grandmother had said. He glanced back at Sansa and then at Fawn, who was watching them both intently. Wolves, he thought to himself. Well then, we'll have to make sure they don't annoy my sister next time, won't we? He said, and Sansa beamed at him. A few days later, after another of their walks, he found himself summoned to his grandmother's solar. He was surprised to see her looking so annoyed, especially since his father was away and usually the cause of her irritation. Garland had accompanied his parents to a celebration at Leonette's, so unless something had happened there, which seemed unlikely, this felt far more serious. Grandmother? He asked as he took a seat. Read, she said, handing him a note. A trout wishes to travel among the roses, bringing news of the union of a stag and a wolf. I don't understand, he said, grasping some of it but puzzled by other parts. Sansa's mother will be visiting us soon. It seems that, coming from King's Landing, she's agreed to betroth her daughter to the prince, his grandmother explained. But she can't. Sansa is far too young. Besides, Lord Stark, he said, his voice laced with concern. Doesn't know, I'd wager. But still, she'll fill Sansa's head with tales of the prince, Willis. It's up to us to fill her head with tales of the truth. How? Marjorie. We need to involve Marjorie. Wouldn't it be better if the king spoke to her himself, grandmother? It would, but he'll do it in person. Jon wouldn't have it any other way, his grandmother said, her fondness for Jon Snow evident in her expression. What about Lady Catelyn? We'll welcome her with all the courtesy she deserves. Grandmother? He said, a hint of admonishment in his tone. I'm not who Lady Catelyn should be worried about. Marjorie, he said, you think my thorns will hurt a trout? Just wait and see what happens if she dares to disparage Jon in your sister's presence. In King's Landing, in the year 294 AC, Catelyn Stark felt as though she were walking on air after speaking with the king. Peter seemed just as overjoyed for her. Sansa was to be queen, it was everything Catelyn had ever wished for, everything she had hoped for her daughter. She longed for her father to have lived to witness this moment, to know that the betrothal was secured and that his granddaughter would be a queen. He would have been so proud of her, so proud of them both. However, Jon Arryn had surprisingly seemed, if not outright against the idea, at least intent on steering her away from the match. Catelyn had been stunned until Peter explained it, setting her straight. Jon loves your husband, Cat, perhaps even more than Robert, Peter said. Then shouldn't he be thankful? Shouldn't he be happy for the match? Caitlin asked. Perhaps, but if we're right about Jon Snow, if we are even close to the truth about your husband. No, Peter, she interrupted. I refuse to believe it. Ned would never do that. He may care for the boy, but I can't believe he would plan against our children. Why wouldn't he just announce it if that were his plan? Because your family wouldn't stand for it, Kat. And Lisa would support you too. If he were to disinherit your line, there would be cause enough for them to rise against him. But if he thinks like a bastard. Suddenly, she saw it more clearly, Robb in this favor, something happening to Bran. Given what Jon had done, how he had ingratiated himself with their bannermen, yes, if that were to happen, it would all seem right, seem true. Ned could claim he had no choice. If they rose against him then, they would appear to be the usurpers, not the bastard. But still, she couldn't fathom it, couldn't even consider it. Could she? I still don't see it, Peter. Why would Jon tell me Joffrey? Is he a monster? A cruel boy who would treat Sansa dishonorably and hurt her? With Sansa tied to the crown, Kat, the bastard is no threat. How could he be? Even with the Lannisters behind him, he couldn't go against the crown, and Sansa would never allow him to usurp her brother, would she? But would she? She seemed closer to the bastard than to Robb while he was there, happier in his company than in that of her own true-born brother. Caitlin knew she had to speak to Sansa, to set her straight about the true nature of her bastard brother and what he truly wanted. Though it had never worked before, this time she would bring news of the prince, of her future. This time it would work, wouldn't it? Thank you, Peter. I'd be lost without you, she said. He smiled at her and kissed her cheek. It took her a few more days to learn from Lisa that everything Peter had said about Jon was true, everything she had suspected seemed to be happening. If she hadn't come here, if she hadn't realized the true depths of the bastard's plan, she shuddered at the thought. My husband is against this match, Kat, Lisa said, glancing around the room before moving closer. I believe if he could, he'd talk the king out of it, have him marry the prince to someone else. But Robert is determined to marry Joffrey to Sansa. Why, Lisa? Why is he against it so? I don't know, Kat. I wish I did. All I can say is he came back from his solar the other day, cursing the king for making the match. Caitlin felt there had to be another reason. Surely Jon Arryn wasn't on the bastard's side. Edmure had said he was furious with him, he had wanted his hand just as badly as Edmure had. Surely even his love for her husband wouldn't lead him to support the bastard after that. She couldn't make sense of it. Edmure, I don't understand. Why? Would he wish for this? Why would Jon be so against the match? Coin, Kat, coin. Coin. Apparently, the crown is in need of it. Perhaps Jon Arryn sees the bastard's connection to the Lannisters as a way to gain their coin? He would see my children ruined for coin. I do not know, Kat. I find it strange that he isn't happy about this. The daughter of one of his foster sons marrying the son of the other, I would have thought he'd be overjoyed. What about the prince? She asked. A boy, Kat. We were all young once. Am I the same boy you grew up with? Are you the same girl? No, I'm not, she said, smiling at the thought. She had changed so much since then. Just days before, she had been ready to head to High Garden, while Edmure had left to return to Riverrun. During that time, Kat had spent most of her days with Peter, enjoying meals together and even dancing once, though only once. The next morning, she met the prince, catching him arguing in the hall with some servants. Behind him, the king's guard looked impressive in his shiny armor and white cloak. But the prince, in his golden doublet with blonde hair and striking green eyes, outshone him. He was a handsome young boy who would grow into an even more handsome man, exactly what her daughter deserved, she thought as she watched him. My prince? She said, curtsying as he turned to look at her. Who are you? he asked, eyeing her curiously. Lady Catelyn Stark, my prince. Ah, Lady Stark. My father told me you were here. It's a pleasure to meet you, he said, kissing her offered hand. You too, my prince, she replied with a smile. Are you still here? Begone. Don't show your face around here again, or it'll be more than my boot you'll feel, Joffrey said, glaring at the servant girl before turning to her. Forgive me, my lady, but these people take advantage. Of course, my prince. You are right to put them in their place, she said. Didn't notice the eye roll from the king's guard. I must beg my leave, my lady. Perhaps we can speak again, he said, and she bid him farewell. She only saw him once more before she prepared to leave. He was riding his horse, looking elegant as he sat atop it, exactly how a future king should. However, the horse moved erratically, and she worried for his safety. He struck it more than once with the whip he carried, and eventually, both he and the horse calmed down. Had she looked closer, she would have seen the blood on the horse's side, the marks left by his spiked spurs digging into its flesh. When she was ready to depart, Peter helped her into her carriage. To her surprise, she felt a twinge of sadness at leaving, even though she knew her destination was important. She needed to speak to Sansa, which meant her journey home would be much longer than expected. Thankfully, Peter had sent a raven back to Winterfell for her. Thank you, Peter, for everything, she said, smiling at him as he kissed her hand. For you, Cat, I'd do anything, you know this, he replied. I do, Peter, and I'm most grateful for it, she said as he closed the door. His man had already headed off to the west. By the time she reached Highgarden, perhaps it would all be resolved, and Jon Snow would be out of her life. She felt a wave of relief wash over her as the carriage began to move. She would protect her family and ensure their future. Robb, Sansa, Bran, and Arya would get what they deserved, just as Jon Snow would. Casterly Rock, 294 AC, Jon glared at the bronze dragon, his anger simmering as it had for days. He refused to speak to it, or to Rhaenix. Instead, Lygaron simply stated that it was time for him to know the truth. Who decided it was time? Why did they decide it? He demanded. His dragon refused to answer. Not even his sister's anger could sway it. All Lygaron would say was that it was time, that he needed to know. Rhaenix worried about him and tried to. Jon felt a heavy weight in his chest, one that no amount of comfort from his sister could lift. Nothing she said or offered seemed to ease his pain. The truth he carried was a burden he faced each day, affecting his sparring, his moods, and his conversations. Every time he spotted a Lannister, an urge to run and hide overwhelmed him, fearing they might see the truth in his eyes. Jay, you can't keep this to yourself, Rhaenix urged. You're not eating, you're not sleeping right. You need to talk to someone. He turned to her, desperation in his voice. Who? Who can I speak to about this? I can't tell them, Ray. I can't, not this. I can't share this with anyone. Do they have to know? Can you just keep it to yourself? She pressed, but then the chirps of the bronze dragon broke the tension. Rhaenix's expression shifted as she turned to Lygaron. You've caused enough problems. You don't get an opinion on this, she snapped, her anger directed at the dragon. Jon tried to drown out their bickering. He didn't want to deal with this, he wished he could erase it from his mind entirely. What do you mean he's your rider? Rhaenix exclaimed, her voice rising. Jon shifted his gaze to the two dragons, who were now mere inches apart, Lygaron perched on the table and Rhaenix on a chair, slightly lower than him. Jay, he says Tyrion. Tyrion is his rider, just like you are mine, she explained, looking at him earnestly. I don't care. No one cares. No one will care, he snapped at Lygaron. You think they'll give a damn about Tyrion being a dragon rider when they find this out? Do you think Tyrion will? His frustration boiled over as he continued, "We could have bonded him differently. I could have claimed it another way, not this, never this." With that, he returned to the glass candles, hoping to find some clarity, some way to make sense of the chaos swirling around him. Jon felt an overwhelming need for a reason, an excuse, or some kind of explanation. But while they would burn for him, they offered nothing in return, no words, no comfort. He was left alone with the truth swirling in his mind, burdened by the weight of what it would mean if his secret ever came to light. His days passed in a haze. He attended lessons, yet found it hard to concentrate. He participated in sparring sessions and spent time with friends, but he felt as if he was barely present. Knowing that Tyrion was his uncle, part of his family, should have brought him comfort, perhaps even joy. After losing so many loved ones, gaining a new family member ought to have meant something significant. But the cost felt too high, the price was far too steep. He would gain an uncle, but the Lannisters shouldn't have to lose a brother, a nephew, or a cousin for him to do so. "Should we take the dragons out, Jon?" Sarella asked, pulling him from his thoughts. He nodded, even though he couldn't recall when she had arrived. They walked out to the cove, Jon carrying Lygaron but barely glancing at the bronze dragon. Rhaenix soared ahead, now almost too large to be handled by anyone other than Walder. He, Arthur, and Jorah stood together, watching as the dragons took to the sky. Both dragons dove into the water, but only Rhaenix emerged with a fish. Lygaron seemed to do so merely for show. Jon could sense the bronze dragon's own distress and concern for him, yet he struggled to forgive him, to reconcile what had happened. So he remained distant, refusing to allow Lygaron to communicate with him, even when the bronze made attempts to reach out. Jon noticed the worry in Arthur's eyes and Jorah's as well. Walder had directly asked him what was wrong, but Jon couldn't find the words to explain. Dinner that night was a quiet affair. They gathered in the family wing, still sharing meals together. Satin had become part of their group now, eating and training alongside them. Jon felt a sense of relief as he spent time with Joy. He knew that her presence somehow made up for his own absences. With her, he didn't have to pretend as much or worry about how he felt. She was the one person who could still bring a genuine smile to his face. "Jon, story," Joy insisted. "Already? You haven't even had your dessert, Joy," he replied. "Dessert yucky, Jon." "No strawberries," she said, shaking her head in annoyance. "No strawberries? Why no strawberries?" he asked, as if the mere thought of it was distressing. "Auntie said I was bad, Jon." "No lessons, no apples, no strawberries," Joy explained, still shaking her head. How about we go for our story and see if we can find some strawberries along the way?" he suggested, and her face lit up with a broad smile. "No tell Auntie, Jon," she whispered, giggling. "No tell Auntie, Joy," he replied, taking her hand. He appreciated her efforts to cheer him up, to make him laugh. She was playing her games, pretending to be punished, and he loved her for it. He had seen her deep in conversation with Cregan, Jenna, and even Loras. A part of him felt upset that it was so obvious to others, but another part cherished the girl even more. He allowed her to lift his spirits, just as she always did. This routine had gone on for almost 2 weeks when Jaime approached him. He had found that warging into Ghost helped him forget his troubles, and warging into Birds allowed him to soar away from his worries. But those were only temporary escapes. So when Jaime asked him to spar the next day, he agreed, only to feel a wave of panic wash over him once Jaime left. "Jay, what is it?" Rhaenix asked. "Jaime, he's trying to figure out what's on my mind," Jon admitted, feeling the weight of her silence. "Ray?" he prompted. "Perhaps it's for the best, Jay." "Perhaps it's what you need," she said. While he agreed, it didn't ease his discomfort. He needed to talk to someone, to share what he was feeling, but who? One of his Kingsguard? Lores? Melisandre? Would they understand? Would they be the right people to talk to about this? Jon felt uncertain. They would listen, perhaps offer advice, but as close as he was to them, they weren't family. He needed family, he needed someone. He needed Marjorie. In the end, he settled for the only other family he had here. Making his way to Cregan's rooms, he felt a sense of relief that his cousin was already asleep. It was his mother he needed to see, his aunt. He found her reading alone, as she often did most nights. She looked up and smiled, clearly pleased for the company, but given what he was about to say, he wondered how long that happiness would last. "Jon, what brings you here to my humble abode?" she asked, still smiling. "Aunt, He started, and she placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Come on, Jon, come inside," she said softly, and he stepped in. "How are you settling in, Aunt?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "I prefer it here, rather than in the guest wing. It's a bit of a chore going up for the lessons, but here, we don't need to hide who we are. We don't have to worry about servants overhearing or someone looking in our rooms." "Someone looked in your room?" he asked, surprised and a little shocked that anyone would do such a thing. "What?" "No, it's more of a worry, one that I don't have now," she clarified, and he nodded. "What's on your mind, Jon? As happy as I am that you've come to see me, you're not one for just popping in unannounced." I found out something, Aunt. About my grandfather. Something terrible. Something horrible. And I don't know what to do with it. I don't know if I should talk about it or try to bury it deep in my heart," he confessed, his voice heavy with emotion. She looked at him thoughtfully. "Your grandfather was a terrible man, Jon. You know this, and I know you do. But perhaps you don't truly understand just how terrible he was. Do you know what he said when he first saw your sister? Time? She smells Dornish to me." It was the same thing he said when he first met Elia, but to say that when meeting his first grandchild, she said, shaking her head. "He was a little better when he met Aegon, but only a little." Did he ever try to do anything to you?" he asked, his voice shaky. He saw it then, she knew what he did about their grandfather's activities. Grabbing him in a hug, she held him tight. "No, Jon. He didn't. He wouldn't have dared," she said, and he felt some relief. "I saw him," he said softly. "Saw him with someone who wasn't my grandmother, someone he forced. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say, Aunt." He was grateful she wouldn't let him go. They stayed like that for a few moments, quietly, neither of them speaking. He appreciated the silence, the relief of not having to say more until he was ready. When he finally did tell her everything, he noticed the concern in her eyes and thanked the gods for her, for family, for having them there when he needed them most. "I wish I could tell you what to do, Jon. I wish I could tell you to speak on it or bury it. But you already know. Coming here, you know what you need to do. You've already decided. It's going to hurt them." "It's going to hurt him," he said, unsure whether he was referring to Tyrion or Jaime. "He's still their kin, Jon. Still Jaime's brother. Were you not still Sansa's, still Robb's, Brandon's, and Arya's? Did you feel any differently even though their mother was not your own?" she asked, looking at him. No, I didn't," he replied. "What about when you found out the truth, Jon? When you discovered who you really were? Is Sansa less your sister now? Are the others not your siblings still?" she continued, and he nodded. Leaving the room later that day. That night, Jon felt a bit better. The weight on his chest was still there, pressing down on him, but he had a sense of relief. When he returned to his room, he found Rhaenix and Lygaron still awake, clearly worried about him. "Hey, guys," he said, addressing both of them. The bronze dragon perked up, pleased to hear his voice. Jon felt Lygaron reaching out to him mentally, searching for a connection, and he allowed it to happen. "I'm sorry, father." "I'm sorry," Lygaron said. "Why, Lygaron? Who are you talking about?" Jon asked. "The gods, father. The old gods wanted you to know. They said you needed to know." "You talked to them?" Jon inquired, hearing Rhaenix echo his question in the background. "I am connected to them, father. I am your link to them," Lygaron explained. That night, Jon found himself walking in a glade surrounded by trees, a circle of weirwoods. He felt the power of the place enveloping him. As he moved, he spotted water in the distance. Looking up, he saw his dragon soaring in the sky, Rhaenix larger than he had ever imagined, and Lygaron flying with someone on his back. He approached the trees, and a man stepped out from behind the largest one. The man had dark green skin and horns on his head, and beside him walked a child. No, not a child, this was one of the children. Both the man and the child smiled and beckoned him forward. As Jon moved closer, a voice boomed in the air. "Long have we waited for you, my prince, but now is not the time. You will come to us, we will show you the path, but not yet, not yet." Suddenly, he found himself in a familiar room, the throne ahead of him. Standing beside it was Tyrion, dressed in black and red. To his left stood a silver-haired woman in the same colors, and sitting on the throne was a dark-haired man, the scar on his face unmistakably identifying him as Jon himself. "The dragon must have 3 heads," Jon said as he stood up from the throne, reaching for Tyrion and the woman's hands. "Or all is lost," he said, his hands clenched tightly. Chapter 69, Lions Roar, Dragons Burn, but Wolves Stalk. Riverrun, 294 AC. The Blackfish. It didn't take Brynden long to hate this situation. No more than a day had passed since his niece and nephew had left, and he was already regretting his decision. He understood why he had agreed to it, but he also knew that nothing was worth this. The phrase had come to him, complaining about trivial matters while attempting to push brides onto him, his nephew, and even his grandnephew, as if he could dictate to Ned Stark who his son should marry. It was exhausting. Sitting at dinner with them, entertaining their foolish stories, felt like a descent into one of the 7 hells. He knew that if his brother had lived to see him in this position, Hoster would have never stopped laughing, never been able to wipe the smile off his face. As Brynden struggled to act like the lord he was pretending to be, trying to maintain a jovial demeanor if not a cheerful attitude, he hoped they would be gone by morning. If they weren't, he feared he might not survive the ordeal himself. In the end, it took them more than a week to leave. Had it not been for a raven from Old Walder himself, Brynden was certain they would have overstayed their welcome even longer. With that headache finally behind him, he turned his attention to the next set of issues, starting with finances. He was astonished at how much they had spent and how costly it was to maintain the keep. "Are these figures correct, Maester?" he asked, directing his question to Vyman. "They are, my lord." "That reflects last year's expenditures," the Maester replied. "Why is it so much higher than the year before?" Brynden questioned, examining the 2 figures closely. "We encountered more problems last year, my lord, some one-off events," Vyman explained. Brynden nodded, though he found the answer unsatisfying. "And the stores, Maester?" he asked, shifting the topic. "We have enough supplies for 3 moons, my lord," the Maester responded, and Brynden looked at him, contemplating their next steps. Brynden was stunned. They had always maintained 2 years' worth of supplies in the keep, both for the harsh winters and in case of a siege. So to find they had only 3 months' worth was unbelievable. "We must order more, Maester. How did we end up with so little?" "Lord Edmure felt we were spending excessively on the stocks, my lord," the Maester replied. "Order more, Maester, more flour and more grain. Do it now." I want at least a year's worth by the time my nephew returns. As you say, my lord, the maester said, leaving the room. Shaking his head, Brynden couldn't help but think that his nephew truly was an idiot. He doubted there was a keep in the Riverlands with fewer supplies than Riverrun. If their bannermen knew of this, their standing would fall even lower. Over the next few days, he took a closer look around the keep. The defenses he had once been so proud of, the ones he had bragged about to Yon, now seemed to be lacking or, worse, in disrepair. He watched the guards as they trained, and what he saw was far below standard. Actually, it was incredibly substandard. This troubled him greatly. Hoster had been a military man, he had led troops and fought in battles. He knew how to prepare men for combat. Was he really this lax? Asking around, he found the same answer he had received about the supplies. Hoster had passed the responsibility for the guards' training to Edmure as well. Brynden resolved to address this issue, too. Ser Robin, Ser Desmond, he said, offering both men a drink as they entered the solar. Once they had settled with their wine, he looked at them seriously. I wish to speak about the guard, sirs. After scheduling extra training sessions and discovering that once again, funds had been misappropriated from Ser Desmond's arms and defense budget, and from Ser Robin's horse budget, he called for the steward to explain. Otherwise Wayne had been steward even when Brynden lived here, and he liked and respected the man. But it seemed he had grown lax in his duties, and that needed to change, or Otherwise would need to be replaced. I'm very disappointed, Otherwise. Riverrun is not what I expected. The supplies, the arms, the defenses, all of it is lacking. As I told your brother on many occasions, my lord, the steward replied, catching Brynden by surprise. You did? Brynden asked. More times than I care to remember, my lord. And my brother didn't address it? Brynden pressed. He asked Lord Edmure to do so, my lord. I found my own duties limited after that. Limited how? Brynden inquired. Maester Vyman and Lord Edmure assumed most of my duties, my lord. I've been relegated to dealing with the household staff rather than the household itself, the old steward said bitterly. I shall speak to my nephew upon his return, Otherwise. He and the maester have not been doing a good job, Brynden stated, and the steward got up to leave. He paused before turning back. It is good you are here, my lord, the man said with a smile as he exited the room. Was it, though? Did Brynden need this headache? Did he want this headache? Was there enough ale to make it go away? As he focused on the last question, he resolved to get very drunk that night, which he did. The next morning, he woke up pleased to see the guards already up and sparring. He heard the sound of the hammer striking the anvil in the smithy. Breathing in the fresh air, he went to break his fast, pleasantly surprised that he had no hangover. Over the next few weeks, he alternated between hearing petitions, settling disputes, and ensuring that the orders he gave were carried out. He was pleased to see that the defenses, drills, and stores were all being taken care of. This left him with time to finally begin searching for the evidence he had actually come here for, to determine whether the unease in his gut was warranted. Are these all of my brother's private notes? He asked the maester. They are, my lord, the maester replied. Brynden read through the notes but found nothing, no insights to allay his fears or reinforce them, just simple notations and talk of. The bannermen were buzzing with talk of potential brides for Edmure. There was nothing personal, nothing to indicate what his brother might have been thinking, and nothing to connect his death to his nephew. It was at dinner that night, sitting beside Otherwise in a hall filled only with the people of Riverrun, that Brynden discovered something that could be of help. Your brother kept a journal, my lord. He hid it in a wall in his privy, the steward said. His privy? Brynden asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, my lord. He claimed he did his best thinking there, Otherwise replied, and Brynden couldn't help but laugh. Who knew about this? He inquired. I don't know, my lord, the steward admitted. To Bryndon's dismay, when he looked for the journal, he found that the wall where it had been hidden had been rebuilt very recently, as if someone had been searching for it before him. Shaking his head, he continued to search and finally discovered some notes hidden beneath a loose board. As he read through them, he was surprised by what they suggested. Letters and drafts asking Ned Stark to allow young Brandon to stay with them, hinting at a promising future for the lad. When Edmure returned alone, Brynden was taken aback. He had expected Cat to accompany him. When his nephew mentioned Sansa's betrothal, Brynden shook his head, thinking they couldn't possibly proceed without Ned's permission. But when he was summoned to his nephew's solar the next morning, he pushed those thoughts aside, eager to find out what was happening. A few days later, as he sat in the Crossroads Inn, a woman approached him. "Would you like another drink, sir?" she asked. "Aye," he replied, still in a sour mood. After finishing his ale and breaking his fast, he mounted his horse, ready to return to those who actually respected him, people who valued him. He looked at the road ahead, east toward the Eyrie. Less than a week, and he'd be home. Yet, he found himself facing north and riding north. It was time to meet his grandnephew. Perhaps there was still some family worth his time, Brynden thought hopefully. The North, 294 AC, Ned Stark. He had looked forward to being home for days, ever since the weather turned and the rains began. Sheltering in the woods with his men during the wet season was far from enjoyable. He longed to see his children, to eat in his hall, to savor one of Gage's pies, to soak in a warm bath, and to sip on some ice-cold ale. As he approached the walls, a smile spread across his face. They had made it back before dark. The old gods had blessed him once again. He glanced down at Lya, noticing her eagerness to be home, mirroring his own feelings. Reaching down, he rubbed her neck, barely needing to lean from his horse to do so. "Come on, girl, let's go home," he said as they rode through the gates. Once inside, Lya immediately dashed off to see her pups while he dismounted and spotted his steward and some of his men waiting to speak with him. "My lord, it's good to see you well," Vayin said. Ned was pleased to see his steward but wondered where Ser Rodrik was. "Ser Rodrik?" he asked, voicing his concern. "He's organizing the men for the next search party," Vayin replied. "Search party?" Ned asked, confused. "Theon Greyjoy, my lord. He escaped, and we've been looking for him for days." "What?" Ned exclaimed. "Where is Ser Rodrik?" He was directed to the guards' hall and found the knight speaking to some of his guards. Upon seeing Ned, Ser Rodrik turned to him. "My lord, I didn't expect you back today," Rodrik said. Ned waved off the comment, more eager to learn what had happened and how Theon Greyjoy had managed to escape. When he heard the details, fury boiled within him, not directed at his guards, as he trusted Ser Rodrik to handle them, but at himself. He should have been more stringent, should have assigned more guards. What was he thinking? He looked up at the sky, noting how it was growing darker. There was no point in doing anything until the morning. Instead of heading to his chambers, Brynden walked into the keep to speak with his children. Arya, Bran, and Jonel were gathered at the table, having finished dinner. He watched as they welcomed Lya home, and he felt a sense of contentment as he saw her rolling on the ground with Nymeria and Summer. It took a moment for them to notice his presence, but when they did, both of his children looked up, and Jonel pointed him out. "Father," Arya exclaimed, her smiling face a welcome sight. "Father." Bran shouted even more excitedly as he dashed behind his sister. Brynden scooped Arya into his arms and swung her around, laughter filling the hall as Bran grabbed his legs. He leaned down to lift Bran up, replicating the joyful spin with him, and the sound of their laughter echoed around them. Carrying them both to the table, he noticed Jonel smiling at him. He set the children down on their seats and took a seat himself. "Lord Stark, it's good to see you home safe and well," Jonel said. He nodded in response. "Aye, it's good to be home, Jonel. And it's Ned." These two give you much trouble, he added, ruffling Bran's hair just as Arya dodged his hand. No, Ned, they both behaved well. They've been diligent in their lessons too, she replied with a smile, and Arya looked at him expectantly. I've gotten even better with my bow, father. I've been hitting the targets more than ever, haven't I, Elle? Arya said, beaming as Jonel agreed with her. And you, Bran? I'm trying, father, Bran answered, and Brynden ruffled his hair again, causing him to laugh once more. Deciding to eat now and take his bath later, Brynden didn't want to miss this precious time with his children, especially knowing he would be leaving again in the morning. Arya never stopped talking, filling him in on everything, including Jonel, Elle, as she called her. He wondered if he should start doing the same. As he listened, Arya began to tell him how Elle had shown her how the old gods saw them through the weirwood trees, how the trees listened when she spoke, and how the eyes on the tree were. Ned always felt the weight of responsibility. He was grateful the children were learning about their heritage, just as he had. It seemed that Elle was a natural storyteller, and his children loved listening to her tales. After finishing his meal, he helped them settle into bed. Before heading off for his bath, he took a moment to speak with Elle. I'll need to leave in the morning, he said. Do you have to go, Ned? She asked, her concern evident in her voice. He's a hostage, Elle, he replied, noticing her smile when he called her that. If I don't find him, I need to inform the crown that he's escaped. I must find him. The children, when will you leave? She asked, her brow furrowing with worry. Early in the morning. Break your fast with them, Ned. They'll want to speak with you, and if you're gone when they wake, it will hurt them, she advised. He nodded, bid her good night, and went to take his bath, relishing the relief the hot water brought to his weary bones. However, that night, his sleep was troubled. First, he was haunted by thoughts of Theon Greyjoy's escape and the dishonor of losing a hostage. Then, his dreams shifted to memories of his wife, the letters he had read, and the painful image of leaving his children behind as he rode off. The next morning, he dressed and had an early breakfast. The children were upset about his departure yet again, although Arya seemed pleased at the thought of capturing the squid, as she called Theon. As he bid them farewell and rode out through the gate, he glanced back to see Elle holding his children's hands. Even though they were sad he was leaving, he took comfort in knowing they were not alone. Still, a part of him couldn't shake the thought that their mother should be with them. Come, my lord, we have a squid to catch, Jory Castle said, breaking his reverie. Ned looked down at Lya. Find him for me, girl, he instructed, and the wolf darted ahead, eager to lead the way. For nearly a moon, they searched. As they rode east toward the stony shore, following the direction Lya had led them, Jory shared that he had gone south as far as Saren and the Bar Rolands but found nothing. Others had ventured west toward Hornwood, all returning empty-handed. A week into their search, they had stumbled upon some abandoned clothing, and Lya had guided them to a horse trail. Yet since then, there had been no sign of Theon. Now, as the sea stretched out before them, Ned couldn't help but wonder if they had missed him. Had he managed to escape? Had he reached the coast and tried to sail home? Was he really that foolish? Deep down, Ned wasn't sure he wasn't. The thought of an Ironborn heading for the sea to sail, even without any knowledge of what to do, seemed all too possible. My lord, look! Jory exclaimed, pointing ahead at Lya, who was racing forward. Let's follow her, she seems to have caught the scent of something. With that, he and his men spurred their horses onward. They soon discovered an old shack with a horse tied outside. Inside, they found an elderly man, bruised and battered but on the mend. Lya stood on the seashore, gazing out at the water before turning back to Ned, as if to say, there, he went that way. As it turned out, she was right. The man had been attacked, most likely by Theon, and his small boat had been stolen. After giving the man a few coins, Ned decided to call off the search and head home. It was clear that Theon was gone. When he returned home a moon later, Ned was surprised to see a group of carts arriving at Wintertown. He was even more astonished to find Luwin directing them to a building. Calling the maester over, he asked, "Who are they?" "My lord, you have returned," Luwin replied. "These are men and women from Lord Bolton's lands. They picked up some more from Hornwood. They've heard about our plans and decided to move their belongings here permanently, rather than just for the winter." Luwin's pride was evident as their plans began to take shape. "Is there anything else I should know?" Ned inquired. "Some ravens arrived for you, my lord. I placed them. Leave them on your desk. I'll come back with you." "No, help them settle in. We'll speak later, Maester." "As you say, my lord," Luwin replied, turning to guide more people into the large building they used. As Ned rode home, he found himself thinking just as much about the ravens that had arrived as the one he would soon need to send to Robert. The thought of informing the king that he had lost the hostage he was ordered to keep was daunting. He dreaded the inevitable ranting and raving that would follow. Yet, as he rode through the gates and saw El and his children waiting for him, their 2 wolves by their side, he realized he didn't really care about the news he had to deliver. Casterly Rock, 294 AC, Jaime watched as Jon fought like a demon, moving faster than he had ever seen him. It was as if Jon was pouring every ounce of concentration into the fight, battling something unseen. The absence of banter and the fact that he had asked both Arthur and Walder to stay away made Jaime uneasy. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Jon dodged a blow that held more power than usual, and Jaime quickly moved back to block another strike just as powerful. While Jon's speed and strength were impressive, his technique was faltering, his blows lacked the precision they usually had. The swordsman in Jaime longed to refine Jon's skills, to incorporate this newfound speed and power into his fighting style, knowing it would make him a far greater threat. But the man who cared for Jon, the one who saw beyond his title and the swordsman he was becoming, felt a deep concern. Something was troubling Jon, and fighting wasn't helping him at all. Jaime allowed Jon to advance, but in just 2 moves, he disarmed him, leaving Jon visibly shocked. As Jon bent down to retrieve his sword, Jaime shook his head. "No, Jon. I want to go again," Jon insisted. "No," Jaime said firmly. "Whatever is bothering you, this isn't helping." He noticed the look in Jon's eyes. Jon glanced at him, his eyes flickering before quickly dropping back down again. It won't," he said a moment later, the lost look on his face almost crushing. "Jon, what is it?" "Talk to me, please," Jaime urged, his voice nearly pleading. I. "Jaime, can we go for a ride?" Jon asked. "Will you talk to me then?" Jaime responded, and Jon nodded. Once again, Jaime was surprised when Jon asked Arthur and Walder to stay back. This time, however, Arthur was having none of it. The Sword of the Morning refused to let his king ride out without him. Not even the presence of Ghost could persuade Arthur, and Jon's arguments fell on deaf ears. Finally, after Arthur agreed that he and Walder would give them some space when they asked, they set off. Jaime recognized the route. Jon had shown him this place before, telling him that Joy had discovered it. Jaime had brought Daisy here one evening to watch the sunset and see the colors change. Casterly Rock took on a red hue instead of its usual golden glow as the sun shone on it. When they reached the hill, Jon instructed Arthur and Walder to wait with the horses. Walder's destrier made their mounts look like ponies beside him. "Here, Jaime," Jon said as he sat down. Had Jaime been less worried about what was on his king's mind, he might have noticed that Jon hadn't called him Lord once. They sat in silence, Jaime giving Jon as much time as he could to gather his thoughts. Each moment stretched on, heavy with anticipation, until finally, Jon began to speak. "I know I've been acting odd these last few days. I've seen how everyone looks at me, and I understand their concern. But I've had a lot on my mind, a lot to work through, and it's taken me time to realize that as much as I'd like to keep this to myself, I cannot. Jaime looked at him and saw tears in Jon's eyes. He wanted to say something, but before he could, Jon continued. If there was any way I could hide it, any way I could deny it, I would. I want you to know that. I need you to know that. But when Tyrion gets back, it's going to be clear. Questions will be asked, and I can't. I can't sit there knowing the truth and lie, not to him, and not to you, never to you. Jon, what is it? Jaime asked, noticing Jon wipe his eyes. Lygaron, I found out who his rider is. It's Tyrion, Jon said softly. Tyrion? That didn't make any sense. How could Tyrion ride a dragon? Only Targaryens could ride dragons. Jaime looked at Jon, saw the concern in his eyes, and it took him a moment to grasp the weight of what Jon was saying. I saw it, Jaime. I saw it myself. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Jaime jumped to his feet, dislodging Jon's arm from his shoulder. He began to pace, shaking his head in disbelief. It couldn't be true. Tyrion was his brother, it simply couldn't be. How? He asked, the one question ringing clear in his mind. Aerys, he. Gods, no. No, it couldn't be. Jaime fell to his knees. The roar of anguish that escaped him could probably be heard all the way to Casterly Rock. The pain in his heart was unlike anything he had ever felt. He saw her face, her hair, her smile, and then he saw him, the scabs on his arms, the long nails scratching and picking at them. He heard the screams, the sounds from that room. Leaning forward, he threw up, his stomach empty. He dry heaved again and again, shaking his head repeatedly. He didn't notice Jon's hand on his back, nor did he see Arthur and Walder rush up the hill, only to be waved away. Instead, he saw a broken queen, the pleading looks she gave him, and he saw his brothers, denying him the chance to do what needed to be done. Looking back at the queen, he watched her face change, her silver hair turning to gold, her indigo eyes shifting to green. He jumped to his feet, shouting, "Should have made him suffer. I should have killed him slowly. I should have killed him the first time I saw him." Tears streamed down his face as he spoke. "I'm sorry, Jaime." "I'm so sorry," Jon said, standing to one side, looking at him but hesitant to approach. "Tyrion, you can't tell him. He can't know this, Jon. He can't know this," Jaime insisted, his voice rising with desperation. Jon met his gaze firmly. "He has to, Jaime. He has to," Jon replied. Jaime shot him an angry look, almost filled with disgust, before turning away. He stormed down the hill. When Arthur moved to stop him, concerned for his well-being, all Jaime saw was a white cloak. In a flash, he punched Arthur, sending his former brother rolling down the hill. Walder stepped forward, but Jaime readied himself for another fight until the giant stepped aside. Mounting Honor, he rode off without looking back. He couldn't tell how long he rode or where he was going, but soon he found himself in front of a stream. He led Honor to the water, dismounted, and began to drink, splashing water on his face. As he looked into the reflection, it shifted from his own to his mother's, then to his brother's, and finally to Aerys, laughing like the madman he was. In a fit of rage, Jaime began to punch the water, only stopping when the white wolf dragged him away. He found Jon, Arthur, who had a bruise on his cheekbone, and Walder waiting for him about a mile away. Jon looked as weary as he felt, while Arthur stood with Walder behind him, silent. Jaime barely glanced at them, his focus solely on Jon, before turning to ride back to Casterly Rock. Once there, he took the lift alone, leaving them to tend to Honor. He headed straight to his room, and upon seeing his wife, he grabbed her in his arms and began to sob. The North, 294 AC, Sir Richard Lonmouth had met Bronn and sent him on his way. The man was eager to head west, even though he knew he would need to stay there for some time. He had been paid well, but he had no doubt that his king and the others would ensure he received better rewards, though he knew it would require much more service to attain the reward he truly desired. "Do you think they'll give me a castle?" Bronn asked. "For what?" "Because I'd like one." Bronn chuckled. "I meant, why would they give you a castle?" Richard replied. "I'm doing them a service, am I not?" "You're doing me a service, one you've been well paid for, twice, I believe." "Third time's a charm, Richard," Bronn said with a laugh. "Aye, it is, but I don't think this will get you a castle. However, if you stick around and make yourself useful, there will be opportunities for you." "I like opportunities. I've heard Lannisport has a good brothel too." "Never had a Westerlands girl, at least not that I know of," Bronn said, shaking his head. Richard laughed. "Make sure you give the note to Ser Daeron, you understand?" I do." "You sure about this?" "Littlefinger is an influential man, master of coin trumps Warden of the West." "Not when the master has no coin, and the warden has it all, Bronn," Richard said, and this time Bronn laughed the loudest. "Aye, right you are. Until we meet again, old friend, be safe." "You too, Bronn." Standing by the boat, he felt relieved that he had sent the message ahead. Bronn could be rash and aggravating. If he annoyed Arthur before knowing the truth or looked at Jon the wrong way, well, he did like the man after all. He shivered as they sailed through the Bight, anticipating their arrival at White Harbor in a couple of days. He looked forward to dealing with Lord Wyman. "Speak to Wyman, Richard. Discuss your plans, set up communications, he's a good man," the king's words echoed in his mind. He would do as he was told, as he always did. Leaving the deck, he walked down to the cabin. It was far too small for him, but it was the best they could manage without a pinnacle ship available. The 3 companions he was bringing with him would help manage his network in this unfamiliar territory. The North wasn't exactly a place where he had many connections to begin with. "Are we nearly there, Elaine?" Moreo asked, shaking his head as he watched the man shudder. The sickness of the sea had hit him hard. Beside him on the other bed sat Para and Wales, a sister and brother he had known for years. They were more accustomed to the slums of King's Landing than to the cold of the north. He would need to have warmer clothing made for them, though perhaps Wyman could assist with that. These 3 would help him organize everything, set it up, and establish a reliable network. He knew he could count on each of them. When White Harbor finally came into view a day and a half later, he was pleasantly surprised. The city was nothing like what he had imagined the North to be. Not that he had ever been north before, but like most people from the South, he expected it to be drab, gray, and cold. White Harbor was only one of those things. They headed straight for the nearest tavern. He ordered rooms, hot baths, and hearty meals. After settling in, they spent the night drinking and soaking up local gossip. "I tell ya, that wolf of the young lord is a scary one," one patron said. "Aye, but at least he makes noise." "Not like the ghost," another replied. "Don't even talk to me about that guy. I lost half a dozen crabs to him, half a dozen. I never even heard him sneak up on me. I turned my head, and there he was. Damn near made me jump out of my skin." "Well, that wouldn't be the first time you've done that, you dirty fool," someone else chimed in. Richard laughed along with the others at the nearby tables. The ale was good, the food was hearty, and the company was better than he had anticipated. He might actually grow to like it here. The next morning, he gave Para some coin to have clothes made for her brother and Moreo, and then he set off for the new castle to speak with the Lord of White Harbor. "I'd like to see Lord Wyman," he said to the guard, who regarded him with suspicion. "And who are you?" the guard asked. "Elaine Mouton, a trader from the south. Riverlands, I've come with a proposal for Lord Wyman," Richard said. The man looked at him again, seemingly assessing whether he was worthy of attention. Richard followed him through the keep, surprised by the decorations. He had heard that the men of the north were frugal, preferring functionality over extravagance, but it seemed the Manderleys had not received that memo. The walls were adorned with banners, broken shields, and rusted swords, while images of mermen and women, along with other sea creatures, filled the space. As he entered the merman's court, he found it even more elaborate. The Lord of White Harbor sat in a high chair beside a young boy with auburn hair and blue eyes, who was speaking to a young girl. Richard's gaze was drawn to a wolf that was larger than a hound. It could only be a dire wolf. Yet, compared to Ghost, this one appeared to be a mere pup. The coloring helped him identify the boy. It was Robb Stark, Jon's cousin, or perhaps even his brother. "A traitor come to speak to you, my lord," the guard announced, and Richard stood in the center of the floor, facing the lord. "A traitor, you say? What is your name, sir, and what brings you to the merman's court?" Wyman inquired. "No, sir, my lord. I'm just a simple trader. Alain Mouton is my name. A friend of mine suggested that if I wanted to trade in the north, I should speak to you." "Your friend's name?" Wyman asked, now studying him more intently. "Jon Snow, my lord," Richard replied, and he noticed the whispers that followed, along with the smiles on Wyman's and the boys' faces. "Jon Snow is a friend of my own, Alain. A friend of the north. Come, sit, have some refreshments. We will discuss trade and our mutual friend." As he walked to the table, Richard felt the way the Lord regarded him. Mentioning Jon's name had earned him some goodwill, but he knew he'd have to do much more before Wyman would consider him a friend, too. After eating and drinking, he spoke enough to prove he genuinely knew Jon, not just someone who casually mentioned his name. Richard had gained access after speaking to his brother about meeting Jon. Now, he found himself in Lord Wyman's solar. "Now, Alain, what's your real name?" Wyman asked as he settled into his seat. Richard smiled, realizing that the Lord was far more astute than he let on. "Sir Richard Lonmouth, Lord Wyman. Our king sends his regards." Meanwhile, in Casterly Rock, in the year 294 AC, Jerian was finding himself returning there more frequently. Joy was growing, and she had come to understand his departures better. While this understanding was helpful, it also meant that she tended to hide her feelings of upset when he left, rather than openly expressing them. He appreciated that his sister had organized some fostering at the Rock for her boys and for Joy. Tyrion would soon head off on his own fostering journey, and Jenna wanted Walder to have someone to grow up with. Martin was also being sent to squire and foster for Ser Adam, which left Willem alone. Jerian knew how much Joy had enjoyed the company of Sansa and Marjorie, and although Jon and the boys were good for her, she needed more girls around her. He was pleased to see that Joy had taken to Ashera and her son, which made him happy. To say Ashera was beautiful would be an understatement. Watching her teach his daughter and seeing their bond had led Jerian to think thoughts he probably shouldn't have. But after spending time with her, he began to consider that perhaps he should entertain those thoughts. As he arrived at the Rock, he knew it wasn't just his daughter he was eager to see. "My lord, we did not expect you back so soon," the guard said. "Nor I, Edwin. Nor I." Taking the lift, he looked forward to Joy, to Jon, and to his family. He smiled at the thought of those purple eyes, chuckling at the memory of the annoying Ser Arthur. However, as he exited the lift, he unexpectedly found himself face to face with his sister. The fact that Jenna was waiting for him was concerning. "Good. Come, Jerian, we must speak." He hesitated for a moment at the abruptness in her voice. "Now," she insisted a moment later, prompting him to follow her down to her room. "Emmon, go somewhere else." "Go," I said, she directed as Emmon approached them, a smile on his face at seeing Jerian. The smile quickly faded at the tone of his wife's voice. Jerian had always gotten along with Emmon. He was a fry, dull-witted and cowardly, but for some reason, Jerian liked the man. Perhaps he just felt sorry for how his sister treated him. Jenna was never cruel or mean, but she didn't suffer fools easily, and by the gods, if his good brother-in-law wasn't a fool. So, Jerian had resolved to be friendly with Aemon, and the fact that it annoyed Jenna was a bonus. "We need to talk about our nephew and Jon," Jenna said, her expression serious. "What's wrong?" he asked, noting the concern etched on her face. "Something's happened. Jon has been quiet for days. Then, a couple of days ago, he and Jaime rode off, and now Jaime is the same. He barely speaks to me, Jerian, neither he nor Jon." "Have they had a falling out?" he inquired, but she shook her head. "Not them," she replied, and he nodded in agreement. "Then what?" "I don't know, Jerian. I can't get through to Jaime. Daisy won't tell me anything, and as for Jon, I need you to speak to him. He's closer to you anyway." "He's close to you too, Jenna." I know. But he may open up to you. Will you go see him?" "I will." "Is he sparring or in his room?" "The vaults, Jerian." "He moved to the vaults," she said, and he almost smacked himself for not remembering. "Is he down there now?" "Aye." "Joy at her lessons?" "Aye." He stood, walked over, and placed his hand on her shoulder, trying to offer reassurance before leaving and heading back to the lift. He met Aemon on the way and told him to give Jenna some time. Jerian took the lift down to the vaults, where Walder stood guard at the door. Walder let him in, and Jerian made his way to Jon's room. The renovations they had completed down here were impressive. It was far brighter than it had been before, especially considering they had done it all by themselves. "Is he inside?" Jerian asked Jors, who was standing at the door. Jors nodded and knocked, and moments later, Jon opened the door, looking surprised to see him. "Jerian," Jon said, stepping aside to invite him in. Once inside, Jon asked Sarilla to give him a moment, and the girl left, heading back to her room. "I take it Jenna spoke to you?" Jon asked, and Jerian nodded. "I can't tell you, Jerian. I want to, but I need to know it's all right from Jaime first." "What is it, Jon? Is it bad?" Jerian pressed, but before Jon could answer, both dragons began to chirp. Lygaron, the noisier of the two, surprised Jerian, as it was usually Jon's sister who spoke more. Looking at the two dragons, Jerian realized that soon Jon's sister wouldn't even be able to fit in this room. She was nearly as large as Ghost now, and Lygaron was not far behind. In the last moon, both had almost doubled in size. If this was how they would continue to grow, within a year, they'd be impossible to hide, even down here. "No, I told you, I'll speak to Jaime first." "I know they should know, but no, I've made my choice," Jon said, arguing with Lygaron. Hearing that worried Jerian. This was more concerning than he had anticipated. Looking between Jon and the dragons, he wondered why Lygaron, specifically, was the one arguing the point. "I'm sorry, Jerian. I'll try to speak to Jaime tonight. Can you give me until then?" Jon asked. "Of course, Jon," Jerian replied, reaching out to touch Jon's shoulder before pulling his hand back. "Of course." He spent the rest of the day with Joy, collecting her from Ashara's lesson. He came close to asking if she would join them for dinner but decided it was best to eat with Jenna instead. That night, as they were eating, Jon came and took Joy for her story. Jaime, however, chose to eat in his room, which worried both him and Jenna. She relaxed a bit when Jaime mentioned he had spoken to Jon. The next morning, Jon came to speak with Jaime, asking him to get Jenna. He led them to his old room and said he needed to share what had been on his mind, something that was clearly causing Jaime a great deal of distress. It didn't take long for Jon to reveal the truth, and by the gods, Jerian wished he hadn't learned it. Jenna took the news even harder, storming out of the room to confront her nephew. Jerian knew that even Daisy wouldn't be able to stop her now. "I'm sorry," Jon said, and Jerian could see how difficult it was for him to bear the weight of this knowledge, to share it, to tell Jaime. But Jerian couldn't comfort the boy, not then, not knowing what his grandfather had done. Instead, he did the best he could. He patted Jon's shoulder and left. For the rest of the day, Jerian walked around in a daze, barely speaking to anyone. He couldn't bring himself to go to Jenna or Jaime. He felt completely numb. He didn't even dare to think about how Tyrion would react or how it would affect him. For the first time since Joanna died, he even felt sympathy for Tywin. His brother had loved his wife, and she had loved him back. Jerian could understand why she hadn't told him, why she had chosen to hide it. Tywin would have burned the world and everything in it to get to Ares if he had known. He would have spent every last piece of gold he had to bring him down. "Are you well?" A voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to see Ashera standing there. "What?" "Jerian, are you well?" she asked, her tone firm. No, I'm not." She took his hand, and he barely registered her touch. All he knew was that she brought him to Joy's room. Seeing her there, his little girl lying in bed, a smile graced her face as she slept. Jerian fell to his knees and wept. He sobbed for Joanna, for Tywin, for Bryony, and most of all, for Tyrion. In his grief, he found solace in Ashara's presence, grateful for her comforting company. Casterly Rock, 294 AC, Ser Arthur found a sense of focus amidst the chaos. He was relieved to concentrate on training, glad that he could keep the others, and especially Jon, engaged in their practice. As he watched his king ride, he couldn't help but compare him to his mother. Jon was a natural, just as she had been, both so in tune with the horses beneath them that others appeared awkward in comparison. Loras had better technique, while Brienne excelled in strength. Cregan and Satin were still beginners at best, but in sheer horsemanship, Jon outshone them all. This put him and Loras on a much more level playing field. Loras probably still had the edge, but if Jon improved his lance work just a little, he could very well take the victory if they were evenly matched. As it stood, Loras won more often than he lost. "Hold the lance higher, Jon," he shouted as the boy raced down the yard. "No, Loras, tighter. Tighter in your saddle." Brienne watched eagerly. If there was one thing she had learned since being there, it was that observing was just as crucial as participating, a lesson he hadn't explicitly taught her. Satin stood alongside her, mimicking Loras's movements as if he too were wielding a lance. Jerian smiled at that. Both of them had learned the value of watching from their king, and it filled him with pride for the boy. "Ser Daeron, there's a man at the gate to see you," a guard announced, and Jerian looked at him in confusion. "Me? Are you sure?" "I am, Ser. He asked for you by name and mentioned something about lips and skulls," the guard replied. Jerian pondered why Richard had sent this man to him instead of Jon or Jaime. Given the recent events at the Rock, perhaps it was for the best. The Lannisters and Jon were still grappling with the revelations he had shared. "Are you sure, Jon?" Arthur asked, concern etched on his face. "I am, Arthur. He is my uncle," Jon replied. "I didn't know, Jon. I don't think anyone did." "The Kingsguard you saw, can you describe them?" One was a younger man, tall and muscular. He had an insignia of 3 lances on red. The other was much older than Barristan is now, with a black sleeping lion sigil on his armor. "Ser Gawain Gaunt and old Ser Harlan Grandison," Arthur said, piecing it together. "So even then, the Kingsguard stood by," Jon remarked, about to voice his frustration but holding back, realizing it wasn't an accusation, though it could have been. "This is why the order must be changed, Arthur. This is why it will be." "Walter, do you have this?" he asked his fellow Kingsguard, shaking off the heavy thoughts. "Aye. Daeron, go find out what you need to know," Walter replied. Daeron made his way to the lift, descending to the base, where he encountered a tall, thin man with black hair and eyes. He was unshaven, his stubble resembling a beard. It was clear he was more than just a courier, he was a fighter, and not one who played by the rules. "You asked to see me," the man said. "If you're Ser Daeron, then I did. I have a letter for you and some instructions that need to be followed." "Who sent you?" Daeron inquired, though he already had a suspicion. "A friend, long thought dead but risen once again." "A man of skulls and kisses, Ser," the stranger replied, and Daeron nodded. "What's your name?" Daeron motioned for the man to follow him. "Bronn." "Bronn what?" "Just Bronn," he answered with a small smile. "Are you hungry or thirsty?" "A drink would be welcome, though I'm eager to get this done." The girls of Lannisport await. As they took the lift, Daeron opened the letter, shocked by its contents. "Bronn, here is a good man. You can trust him, he was hired by Littlefinger, under Lady Catelyn's orders, has a plan to kill Jon. Fortunately for us, Bronn has been in my employ for some time. What I've uncovered in the Riverlands confirms that it was the Tullus who ordered the attack by the Trident. I believe it's best to let the attack happen. It will make a show for Daeron, making it seem as though Bronn was foiled and killed. As I mentioned, he's a good man who will help protect Jon and teach him things you might not. Pay him well and ignore him when he asks for a castle. Your friend, Elaine." Arthur was stunned. Did they really hate him that much? Did her hatred run so deep that she would order the death of a boy? He was torn about what to do. Should he listen to Richard? Should he trust this man? Should he tell Jon? Or should he just burn this letter? Could he? He knew the truth about the last one, and because of that, he understood the others too. He couldn't destroy it, Jon needed to know. "Did you read this?" he asked, turning to Bronn. "Can't read," Bronn replied. "So if I were to tell you that this letter said I was to kill you?" Arthur asked, curious. "Then I'd wish you luck and call you a damn liar," Bronn said, earning a smirk from Arthur. "You ready to stay here for a while then? As long as the pay is good and I get to visit the ladies when I want, I." Casterly Rock, 294 AC, Jon. Daisy had come to him the first night, or, to be more accurate, she had sent for him. Jaime was lying in their bed while Daisy sat in the solar waiting for him. She was furious with him, and he thought that if she weren't so close to giving birth, she might have struck him. Her anger was palpable. Though perhaps that was wishful thinking on his part, as he felt he deserved a strike or two. "Why did you tell him, Jon?" she demanded. "I had to, he needed to know. He's his brother, Jon, and you've taken that from him. He's still his brother. He'll always be his brother. You know what I mean. What am I supposed to do, Jon? He's broken." I don't know, he said, shaking his head. Being ignored by both Geryon and Jenna was something he expected. He noticed the looks she directed at him as they passed, the stilted greetings, and the lack of concern for his lessons. Apart from joy, he felt like a stranger to the Lannisters. If it weren't for the fact that he had taken on some of Jaime's duties, he might as well have not existed to them at all. It hurt, but he knew he deserved it. He had stolen something from them, had hurt them, and he understood it would take time for those wounds to heal. Yet, that didn't make things any easier. What did help were Joy, Loras, and Satin. It was Brienne and Cregan, sparring, practicing with a spear and an axe, jousting. It was spending time with his dragons and working with the glass candles. He still couldn't see the past or the future when he looked, but he could see the present at will now. Though he hadn't fully mastered it, he saw Tyrion and Oberyn in a large square, the sun shining down on them. The image forced him to leave the candles for a while. He saw other things too, his brother sailing on a ship, his uncle riding beside Ghost's mother. He saw Sansa walking through beautiful gardens and Marjorie laughing at some joke. Days stretched on, and when Arthur approached him with a man he didn't recognize, he sensed something was wrong. He could see it in Arthur's face and the way he walked slowly. "Ghost, to me," he commanded, and the wolf was at his side in an instant. His friends looked at him with concern, but he shook his head to reassure them that all was well. "John, can you come with me and Bronn for a moment?" "Aye," he replied, warily eyeing the man Arthur called Bronn, who looked equally wary of Ghost. "Is that thing really real?" Bronn asked, glancing at Ghost. "Aye, he is," Arthur confirmed. As they stepped out of the lift and made their way up the stairs, John found himself on the parapet. To his surprise, there were no guards around, which he knew meant Arthur must have sent them away. He looked at Arthur with curiosity and handed him the note. As Arthur read it, John felt his anger rising, the rage threatening to boil over. He reached down to stroke Ghost's fur, and the fire within him quickly receded, replaced by a chilling calm. "What's your plan?" John asked a moment later, surprising both Arthur and Bronn. "We make it look like a failed attempt," Bronn replied. "We need to control the narrative. I'll disguise myself, and we should make it public. Lannisport would be best." "Do you have other guards?" "Aye," John confirmed. "Good. We'll use them. And that wolf of yours, can he be controlled?" John remained silent, and a moment later, Ghost had pinned Bronn to the ground, his paws forcing the man's hands down, leaving him no chance to reach for his knives. After a brief moment, Ghost allowed Bronn to rise. Bronn looked at John, shook his head, and laughed. "A simple "I" would have sufficed, you bastard." "Well, now you know for certain, don't you?" John replied, a smirk playing on his lips. "We can use the wolf, he'll be the best asset. I'll stage an attack to make it look real. Your guards will protect you while I run a little, then the wolf takes me down. Your guards can take my body, and that's it. But if you fail, won't that just prompt them to send more?" Arthur asked. John shook his head. "Not for a while. They'll be too scared, too worried they've been found out. It'll take time for them to gather the courage again." Bronn looked at him with newfound respect. "You really are as clever as they say." "Aye, the boy has the right idea. Maybe we should make it clear that I didn't die, that I'm still alive. That'll worry the hell out of them." "Aye," John agreed, turning to walk away. "John," Arthur called out. "I need to speak to my sister and make sure Bronn has a place to stay. He'll be with us for a while." John felt that familiar weight settle on him once more. As he stood in the lift, Arthur and Bronn followed him. Arthur insisted they stop and that he should bring Walder along, so he did. But deep down, he felt the fire, the inferno threatening to ignite. She hated him that much. She hated him not because he was a bastard, but because he was her husband's bastard. That was the crux of it. That was why she not only wished him dead but had actually tried to have him killed, not just once, but twice. It was Edmure who had perhaps organized it, given that the attack came in the Riverlands. And now, between the three of them, they had sent Bronn. But he knew it was her. John, at Jenna's urging, had begun to learn about the Seven. The Septon of Casterly Rock was more than happy to teach him. He had spent time with the Septas too, even asking the Septon of Castamere about bastards once. "Why do the Seven hate bastards, Septon?" he had asked. "The Seven don't hate bastards, John. All children are innocent in the eyes of the mother." "But I thought." "No, it's not a religious thing. There are those with prejudices, and here in the South, bastards are thought much less of. But when it comes to the faith, sometimes the messenger may deliver the wrong message." Stepping off the lift, he walked through the vaults, eager to speak to his sister, eager to see his son. He wanted to determine if the fire he felt inside was something that should be unleashed or something he needed to stoke, to keep burning until the right time. When he arrived, his room was empty. Sarella had taken them to the beach, and he smiled at the thought of them cooling off in the inferno. "Sister, we need to speak." "You too, my son," he said softly in his mind, and the dragons flew to him. Turning to Walder, he asked for some space, some time alone with his dragons and Sarella. As Rhaenix and Lygaron flew and landed beside him, Ghost sat down in front of him. He sat there for a while, lost in thought. Jay sat quietly, alternating his strokes between the three dragons as he gazed out at the water, allowing its tranquility to wash over him. "I need your help. I have to make a choice, and I can't do this alone. All three of you, I need your support," he said earnestly. "What is it, Jay?" Rhaenix asked, his curiosity piqued. As Jay began to explain, he anticipated his sister's reaction, as well as Ghost's. But it was Lygaron who truly surprised him. The bronze dragon took to the skies, and Jay watched as his flames danced against the sand. Rhaenix quickly followed, soaring alongside him. Jay could feel their emotions intertwining in his mind, each of them expressing their thoughts. "Burn them, Jay. Burn them, father. Burn them all." Ghost approached, moving in close. Their eyes locked, red meeting gray, and Jay felt the wolf's warm breath against his face. He sensed the judgment in those deep eyes, but then laughter bubbled up within him as Ghost licked his cheek. He hugged the wolf tightly, holding him close. "You're right, boy. I'm a wolf too." Chapter 70, Maesters and Servants. Pentos, 294 AC. Tyrion found that he liked this city far more than Oberyn or even Illyrio did. They had both regaled him with stories of other cities in Essos, but his curiosity about Pentos was piqued. He recalled how his uncle Kevin had traveled back and forth to Braavos, sharing countless tales about the city. Yet, all Kevin had really said was that Braavos was nothing compared to Lannisport. Tyrion wondered if Kevin was trying to dissuade him from traveling, just as his father had always done, or if perhaps Essos simply didn't appeal to him. Regardless, for Tyrion, the thrill of travel and the prospect of exploring a new place had always been a dream, one he never expected to fulfill. He found Pentos fascinating, the culture, the stories of the Magisters, the princes, the Maid of the Sea, and the Maid of the Fields captivated him. After reading the journal and learning the names mentioned within, he sent the men Oberyn had hired to gather gossip to seek out Loamra. But for now, the man remained elusive. Instead, he heard whispers of Daenerys Targaryen and Viserys Targaryen. Tales spread of a Magister offering large sums of money to find them, and men were coming from miles around to join the search. "How many men has he sent out?" Tyrion asked the girl beside him. She shook her head. "I do not know, only that he sent many." After sharing his findings with Oberyn and Illyrio, they decided to arrange a meeting with this Magister. Perhaps a shared interest would lead to more information. But the Magister made them wait for quite some time before agreeing to meet them. Tyrion knew it was best he wasn't present. If the man was as rich and powerful as claimed, he would surely learn of him soon enough. Just as Oberyn and Illyrio left, the girl approached him. She was young and pretty, and though she had a serious expression, and he couldn't help but imagine how lovely she would look when she smiled. "My mistress wishes to see you," she said, and he regarded her with caution. "Your mistress?" "I serve the temple. High Priestess Harlows asked me to speak with you." "She wishes to see me? Why?" "She claims to know the man you seek, Tyrion Lannister. She knows and wishes to help the prince who was promised." Arranging his guards, he decided to take a palanquin to the temple. It seemed that horses were not welcome on the main streets, and the distance was far too great for him to walk. It took them an hour to reach the great temple, and as he stepped down from the palanquin, he was taken aback by its size. While it may not have been as grand as the September of Baelor, it was enormous compared to the surrounding buildings. He noticed smoke rising from various sections of the temple. The fires were always burning, no doubt. Tyrion hadn't spoken much to Melisandre or the guards accompanying her, but he had shared his thoughts with Oberyn, who was wary of their closeness to Jon and the potential influence they might wield. It was a concern Tyrion felt as an uncle. He knew Jon far better than Oberyn did and was certain that the boy did not pray to a red god. As he entered the temple, he marveled at the interior. The expense and the sheer effort it took to build something like this were impressive. "Welcome, Lord Tyrion. The High Priestess will be with you shortly. Would you care for some wine?" a red priest offered as a girl stepped forward with a tray. "I thank you," he replied. "Lapax," the man said, and Tyrion nodded, taking the wine and sipping it. He wasn't sure what it was, certainly not anything from Westeros, but he found it enjoyable enough to welcome a second glass. He was just finishing it when the woman arrived, and for the briefest moment, he was transported back to his chambers, looking at Arianne. The High Priestess may have been. She was a little taller than the Princess of Dorne, but in every other way, she could have been her twin. As she smiled and beckoned him to follow, Tyrion felt an unexpected connection. The room they entered was ablaze with flames. Torches lined the walls, casting flickering shadows, while bowls filled with fire were placed around the room. In the center, a large bowl blazed brightly, its flames reaching high into the air. The High Priestess remained silent, simply gesturing for him to step closer, her smile encouraging him forward. "Look into the flames, Tyrion. See that which you came to find," Harlows instructed. He stepped forward, drawn into the fire's dance. Before him, he saw a man tending to the sick, distributing food at a street corner. The scene shifted as he watched the man walk back to a small house, passing the tavern where he and Oberyn were staying. The images morphed again, revealing a small silver-haired girl running joyfully with a large dog. Behind her, horses galloped, and a wall of ice loomed in the background, while a bronze dragon soared above, flames spewing from its mouth. He glimpsed a rider atop the dragon, too far away to recognize, but as the dragon landed before him, he could see the figure clearly. Clad in armor of black and red, the rider smiled and gestured for him to come closer. "It's time to be a dragon," a voice echoed in his mind. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness as all the flames extinguished at once. Tyrion scanned the void around him, hearing indistinct movements that sent a chill through him. He jumped as a hand grasped his. "Come with me, my lord, for the night is dark and full of terrors," Harlow's voice guided him as she led him from the room. As they stepped outside, the light was almost blinding after the darkness they had just left. He turned to the High Priestess, catching her sympathetic smile. Did she see the vision too? He needed answers. Once they were far enough away from the room, he asked, "What did you see?" Her expression shifted to one of confusion. "Me, my lord? The vision was meant for you. Did you not see?" She looked at him, searching for any sign of deceit in her words. If she was lying, she was a far better actress than he could ever hope to be. "I saw the man I was searching for. He is here, helping the sick and needy. Then you must go to him, for our prince has need of his assistance. I saw other things, strange things, impossible things. Then R'hllor has a purpose for you in what is to come. Speak to Melisandre, my lord. Speak and learn," she urged. Before he could respond or ask more questions, she vanished. As he took the palanquin back to the tavern, he felt the overwhelming need for a drink. By the time Oberyn and Illyrio returned, he was well on his way to being quite drunk. He was grateful they didn't ask him what was wrong. He was relieved about many things concerning the prince and his paramour. He had expected judgment, scorn, and disappointment, especially since it was clear Oberyn knew about Arianne and him. But instead, he found none, just like now. That night, as he slept late, his dreams were different from before. Gone were the visions of the girl with her dark skin and perfect body, and the feelings he had experienced with her. Instead, he dreamt of dragons soaring through the sky. One was white, another black, and the last was bronze, each with riders on their backs. Meanwhile, in Pentos, 294 AC, Illyrio and Oberyn made their way to Illyrio's manse. The journey felt long, and they were both surprised by what they found upon arrival. Illyrio was rumored to be one of the richest magisters in Pentos, yet the manse was disappointing. It was far less impressive than others they had passed on their way, and without the unsullied guards, she might have thought it abandoned. This impression only grew stronger once they stepped inside. It looked as if no one had lived there for a long time. She felt a chill run down her spine. Nerves on edge, she noticed that Oberyn was coiled, ready to strike. The fact that he felt the same way both calmed and worried her. At least the spread laid out before them and the man himself matched the image of a wealthy magister. She had seen her share of fat men, but Illyrio was among the largest she had ever encountered. Watching him pick from dish after dish drained her appetite entirely. Still, she accepted the wine and took her seat when Oberyn did. The magister shot her a look she was all too familiar with. Reaching out, she tried to calm Oberyn down. Unsullied or not, guards or not, he wouldn't let any man look at her that way. "My prince, my lady, it is a pleasure to welcome you to my home," Illyrio said, and both Oberyn and she smiled in response. "I thank you, Magister, for this opportunity to speak with you, though I had hoped it would be sooner," Oberyn replied. Illyrio regarded him and spoke in a placating tone. "My apologies, my prince. My business took me elsewhere, and I was unable to accede to your request sooner. I hope you can forgive me, I meant it as no slight." "There is nothing to forgive, Magister. You know why I've come? I take it you have heard of my interest in the Targaryen children?" Illyrio asked. "I have, Magister. Dorne is also interested, or would be interested, in finding and protecting the children." "Would they indeed? And yet you have never attempted such a thing?" "Politics in Westeros are complicated, Magister. My brother and I have no love for the stag who sits the throne, but if we were to move against him, if we were known to be contemplating such a thing, then Dorne would suffer even more than it already has because of Robert Baratheon." The disgust in Oberyn's voice was evident, even to the Magister. "And should Dorne know where the children are? Should they be able to speak to them? Then plans could be made for the future, Magister." Oberyn smiled, and the Magister returned the gesture. As Illyrio sized him up, it seemed he was about to say something but hesitated at the last moment. "I have spent a great deal of coin trying to find them, to bring them under my protection, my prince. Alas, thus far, it's been a wasted effort. But I shall continue to try. Perhaps if I succeed, you and I could speak again, speak of the future," Illyrio said, a small smile on his face. "Of course, Magister. Should the time come, Dorne will look to the future," Oberyn replied. Their conversation then shifted to various topics. Illyrio, being a cheesemonger, wanted to discuss trade with Oberyn. Although Oberyn could engage in such matters, it was clear that he didn't enjoy them. Still, he struck a deal, keeping the dialogue open. With a little expense, this Magister might become an ally in the future. After bidding their farewells, they made their way back to the tavern, with Oberyn remaining silent throughout the journey. When they found Tyrion as drunk as they were, it was a surprise, not because he didn't drink or get drunk, but because he was doing so without their company. Seeing the look on Tyrion's face, both Oberyn and she kept the conversation light, only speaking seriously once Tyrion retired for the evening. "Did you believe that mummery?" Oberyn asked as they lay in bed later that night. "No, that was not the Magister's home. This begs the question, why did he wish to meet us there? Had he not had the Unsullied with him, I might have thought it was for safety. But no, the man is hiding something, something he doesn't want us to see." "What do you mean?" "The Targaryens, perhaps. Maybe he has already found them," Oberyn said, studying her reaction to gauge his seriousness. "You believe so?" "I do not know, my love, but I cannot think of any other reason why he would hide his home from us. why he would not allow us to see him truly. You know these men, you've seen them. They flaunt their wealth, and they don't hide it. What do you make of his suggestion of working together in the future? Is it a genuine offer or just a way to throw us off? She asked, and he smiled. Both. He moved on top of her, and all talk of the fat magister was finished for the night, at least. As she felt his hands glide down her body and his lips on hers, she was relieved that the image of the fat man staring at her had vanished. The next morning, she woke up feeling satisfied and surprisingly well rested. He lay beside her, still asleep, and she chuckled at the fact that, for once, she had woken first. She got up, washed, dressed, and headed downstairs to break her fast, allowing him to rest a little longer. While she wasn't surprised to see Oberyn and Daemon there, she was shocked to find Tyrion sitting at the table. "Do my eyes deceive me? Am I still asleep?" she said with a smile as she took a seat beside him. "No, you must be awake, for why would I be in your dreams, my lady?" Tyrion replied, a small smile on his face. "You are well, Tyrion?" she asked, her concern evident. The smile he gave her widened. "I am, thank you, Illyrio." They broke their fast together, and Tyrion seemed to come more alive with her presence. Both Oberyn and Daemon didn't know what to make of him, and she couldn't fault them for it. They were more accustomed to discussions about fighting and sparring. Had Jon been with them, she was certain all three would have been deep in conversation about weapons. But Tyrion's weapon was his mind, and to Illyrio, it was just as powerful as any sword. She knew Oberyn shared this sentiment, even if his daughter and former squire did not. "How did it go with the magister?" Tyrion asked. She shook her head before sharing her and Oberyn's suspicions. "You think he's playing the part of a mummer?" "I do. I also wonder what it is he's hiding from us." "Perhaps Loamarin knows more about this Illyrio," Tyrion said, sipping warmed milk and finishing the last of his burned black bacon. "You found him?" she asked, a smile spreading across her face. "I know where he is. We can go see him today." Her happiness was palpable. Illyrio wasn't their main reason for being there, but they wouldn't leave until they uncovered what the magister was up to. Loamarin was their priority. Meanwhile, in Andalos, 294 AC, the Hound had come to enjoy traveling through Essos, despite his disdain for the cities and their comforts. Out in the open, he appreciated the warm nights and the clean air. The only downside was the search for water. It was a constant struggle. He had lost count of the number of water holes he had dug, always ensuring to carry extra whenever they filled their pouches. As he glanced at the princess, noting how dirty she was, he couldn't help but smirk. Washing was far from their priorities. But then he spotted a stream in the distance and heard its rushing waters. Dany's face lit up, and he smiled in return. "I told you we'd find some this way," she said smugly as they rowed toward the water. "So what? Do you want to be knighted for being right? Can a girl be knighted?" "I could be a knight," she replied, a playful smirk on her face. "You'd be better than most of the fools," he said, and she sat up a little taller on her horse. "Ser Dany, the Knight of Dragons," she declared. "Ser Dany, the knight who smells," he shot back, earning a glower from her. But as he turned away, she leaned down to smell herself, making a disgusted face. "I need a wash," she said determinedly, then kicked her horse into a run. For fuck's sake, he thought, racing after her. He actually reached the stream before she did, quickly checking the area for safety before walking over. He picked up a rock and tossed it into the water. As he noticed the water was clear, he waited for her to arrive and pointed to a small bend where a bush would shield her from his view. "I'll go over there." "You sing, little dragon," he said. "I'm not singing," she replied, looking at him defiantly. "You sing so I know you're well," he insisted, and she nodded in response. They filled their water pouches and led the horses to the stream's edge to drink their fill. After ensuring she had her dagger with her, he walked over to wash. As he looked down at the sheer amount of dirt washing away, he felt grateful they had found the stream. While he scrubbed himself clean, he heard her voice and realized that even though she was Rhaegar's sister, she hadn't inherited his musical talent. The Dragon Prince was renowned for his harp playing and beautiful voice, while his sister would be known for other qualities. He chuckled as her singing grew louder, clearly enjoying herself as she belted out, "The Dornishman's Wife." It was the only song he knew, so naturally, it was the one he had taught her. Once he finished washing, he lingered a moment longer to listen to her sing before heading back to find her done. "Your turn to wash the clothes," she said, a teasing glint in her eyes. He shook his head. "I washed them last time." "I gave you the last piece of chicken, remember?" she said, sticking her tongue out at him. "Fucking chicken," he grumbled as he took her dirty clothes and his own to wash. They traveled for nearly a week before reaching a small village. It was modest, but it would do. They found a small inn, booked a room, and ordered food, both ravenous from their journey. That night, he watched as she placed the eggs in the fire, speaking softly to them. At first, it worried him, it scared him to hear her talking to the eggs. But when she handed one to him and he felt its cold surface, then held it as she asked him to touch it, he was taken aback by its warmth. The movement inside shocked him, but he felt a strange connection beginning to form. She felt relieved. "The eggs are alive," she said. "They want to be born. I can hear them, the black egg, it speaks to me in my head." For now, he was willing to go along with her. "Will we leave today?" she asked as he woke up. "Aye, they say Norvos is only a week away. We could go there, get supplies, and move on from there," he replied. Then he noticed her hand. "What happened to your hand?" He jumped out of bed, almost tearing the bandage off. "Aye, the dragons, they needed it." "Needed what?" "My blood. I gave them my blood." He examined the cut and felt relieved to see it wasn't too deep and that she had at least cut it straight. He dipped her hand in the water bowl to clean it, and then took a piece of the sheet to rewrap her hand. She smiled at him as he worked, and although he wanted to ask her more, to tell her that what she was doing was harmful, he found he couldn't. They gathered their supplies that day and set off. Each night on the road, she would cut her hand and let her blood drip onto the eggs. Each morning, he would check her wound, bandage it up, and they would continue on their way. The day before they reached Norvos, he woke up to see her smiling at the eggs. He got ready to fix her hand again, but found it wasn't needed. "What happened?" he asked. "I don't need to anymore," she said, and he felt more relief than curiosity about why that was. They arrived in Norvos early the next day. He looked around cautiously. There was no way the Magister could have received news of what they did to the city before they arrived, but there could still be those he had sent out to find them lurking nearby. To his relief, it seemed clear. They soon found a tavern and ordered a room. Tomorrow, they would buy their supplies and continue their journey. As they ate that night, a woman slowly approached their table. He didn't even hear her walk. He moved quietly. "My princess, may I speak with you?" He looked up warily, his hand resting on his sword, as the Red Priestess stood at the table, gazing at Dany. "Who the hell are you?" he asked. "My name is Rhalsar. I serve the temple here. May I sit?" "I mean neither of you harm, but if I were lying, I'm sure you could deal with me easily," she replied. He turned to Dany, who nodded. "My princess, I bring you greetings from Darius, our high priest. We have long awaited your arrival," she said with a smile. Sandor examined her more closely now. She was a pretty girl, no more than 18, he guessed. Her black hair was as dark as coal, and her vivid blue eyes shone brightly. She seemed at ease in this place, and he noticed how people regarded her. Whether it was fear or respect, he couldn't quite tell, but he knew that not a single person here would help him against her if it came to that. "How did you know I was coming?" Dany asked, her skepticism evident. We saw it in the flames, along with what you carry, the woman replied. Feeling Dany tense up, Sandor reached for his knife. Fear not, princess. I come here by Rhaenys' will. We can help you birth your children, help you awaken the dragons from stone. They no longer need your blood. Is this true? He watched as Dany gasped, then steadied herself, nodding in silent confirmation of the woman's words. Then it is almost time. I shall return tomorrow. If you wish to come with me for answers, I will take you to Darius. If not, I wish you good fortune, princess, and hope Rhaenyra blesses your journey. Later that night, he woke to find her sitting by the fire again. He knew of these red priests and their obsession with fire, which concerned him greatly. He feared she would lead him where he couldn't follow. But she was his princess, his charge, her will was more important than his own. Her safety and her future were all that mattered. He had turned his back on wealth for her, turned his back on Westeros. Whatever she asked, he would do it, for her, for his princess, for his sister. Casterly Rock, 294 AC, Jenna. The rock felt different these last few days. Tyrion was spending more time with Joy than ever before. Not that he hadn't always enjoyed her company, but since the news, since finding out about Joanna and Tyrion, he barely let the girl out of his sight. It was almost suffocating for her. This morning, he had taken her away from her lessons and brought her with him to Lannisport. They sat quietly in the carriage, as she had been for most of the time since learning the truth. Knowing how Jaime felt, how Tyrion felt, how Tyrion would feel, made her own grief, anger, and sadness seem smaller, though it was still very much present. Her mind wandered to different places, jumping to various conclusions, but it always returned to the same thought: they had killed her because she bore a dragon. This realization filled her with anger at the dragons, at Aerys for his actions, and at Jon for what he had told them and for simply being part of that family, sharing the same blood as Aerys, the same blood as her nephew. Auntie sad, Joy said beside her, and Jenna felt grateful for Joy's innocent games this morning. I'll be better soon, she replied, forcing a smile. Like Jon? Joy asked, looking up at her. Jon? Jenna echoed. Jon is sad too, Auntie, Joy said, and Jenna nodded. She knew he was sad, but she wasn't ready to offer him comfort yet, not when she had none to offer herself. They stopped off at Kevin's, and she spoke to Dorna about the fostering. She had been lax in her duties these last few days, she, Jaime, Tyrion, all of them. They needed to at least go through the motions. After lunch with Dorna and Joy, where Joy spent most of the ride back to the rock quietly observing them, especially Jenna. As the trepidation built within her, she sat up straight and said, "You need to speak to Jon, Aunt." What? Jenna replied, confused. Jon, he's sad. You're sad. Jaime, Papa, everyone is sad. You all need to talk. Joy, it's nothing. It'll. No, Aunt, Joy interrupted, her gaze steady. It's not that easy. You're just a little girl, you don't understand. It's not that simple. Jenna shook her head, fighting back tears. Speak to him, Aunt, or I won't speak to you. Jenna watched as Joy did exactly what she had promised. For the rest of the ride, every attempt to engage her was met with silence. Joy barely looked at her, and when they finally reached the rock, she was out of the carriage before Jenna could even move. Once in her room, Tyrion came to her, concern etched on his face. Did you and Joy have an argument? Did you chastise her for something? She won't speak to me, Jenna. She said I was supposed to talk to you, he explained. Jenna couldn't help but chuckle. Out of the mouths of babes, Tyrion. Out of the mouths of babes. She stood up and walked out of the room, leaving her brother looking confused. Taking the lift down, she found herself outside the vault door. After speaking with Walder, he opened it and let her in. She was surprised by what she saw inside. They had done an incredible job down here. While it wasn't as bright and airy as the upper levels, it was still much lighter than it had been. The corridors were clean, and the rooms were brightly lit. She made her way toward Jon's room and found George standing guard outside. "Is he inside?" she asked. The knight nodded and knocked on the door. It wasn't Jon who answered, but Sarella. As she stepped in, she found Jon and Loras deep in conversation, while Rhaenix and Lygaron chirped along. The bronze dragon paused to look at her. "Lady Jenna," Jon said with a smile as he noticed her. Jon quickly rose to his feet. "Jon, can we speak alone?" she asked, glancing around the room. He surveyed the space before meeting her gaze. "The beach, my lady," he suggested, and she nodded in agreement. They walked through the vaults and stepped out onto the beach, where they found Cregan and the two wolves, his mother and Ser Arthur, laughing as the wolves rolled in the sand, playfully nipping at each other. Dusk had grown, but compared to Ghost, he was still just a pup. Yet, the white wolf made sure to let the black one win their little tussle. "There's a small spot up here I sometimes go to when I want to be alone," Jon said. She smiled and nodded as he turned to Ser Arthur and shook his head. The place he led her to was breathtaking. She understood why he cherished it so much. It was secluded enough to remain unseen, yet from where they sat, they could see everything: the rock, the entrance to the vaults, the beach, and the sea, all laid out before them. She closed her eyes, imagining how beautiful it would be at sunset. "Joy got annoyed with me today, Jon. Very annoyed. It seems I didn't take into account someone else's sadness," she said softly, reaching out to take his hand in hers. "I'm truly sorry for that." "There's nothing to be sorry for, my lady," he replied, a small smile gracing his lips. "There is, Jon. I became so wrapped up in my own feelings that I never considered yours. You shouldn't have to bear this alone. You're a boy, Jon, a wise and intelligent one, but still a boy. I wasn't alone. I had Rhaenix and Lygaron, Loras and Joy. I had Cregan and Ashera, Arthur, Walder, Jors. I had my friends, my family. I wasn't alone, Jenna. We're your family too, Jon. In our haste and desperation for what it meant to us, we left you alone. We forgot what it means to you, and we forgot that you are family too. I promise I won't forget that again. I'm so sorry, Jenna," Jon said, his voice trembling. She held him close, wrapping her arm around his shoulder as he sobbed against her side. "It's all right, my love. Let it out, let it all out," she comforted, pulling him in tighter as he continued to cry. When he finally calmed down, she watched him wipe his eyes and give her a soft smile. Leaning forward, she kissed his forehead gently. "I wish I didn't know, that I didn't have to tell him, to tell all of you," Jon said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know, Jon. But secrets have a way of being found out. It's better that we know and are ready to support him when he comes back than to be how we were with you. We are a family, Jon. We'll get through this together," she assured him. "Family," he echoed, and she kissed his forehead again. "Now come on, people will worry that we've run away together, you being such a handsome lad and all," she said, smiling as she saw him laugh along with her. She held his hand as they walked back, wanting to maintain that connection, wanting him to feel how much he meant to her, to all of them. After leaving him in his room, she took the lift up and walked straight to her nephew's room. Knocking at the door, she didn't give Daisy a chance to deny her entry before stepping inside and standing at their bed. Jaime lay there, half-dressed and curled on his side. Her heart ached for him, but they needed to move on, and they needed to do it now. "Jenna," Daisy said, her voice raised. Whether it was because she understood the urgency of the situation or the look on Jenna's face, she said nothing more. "It's time to get up, Jaime. This can't go on any longer." We're failing him, and we'll fail Tyrion too if we don't deal with this, Jenna insisted. I can't, he replied, his voice sounding like the little boy he once was. Jon is hurting, Jaime. We've let him walk around in pain because we've been too busy dealing with our own feelings. How we feel doesn't matter right now. Jon sat up in bed, his voice loud and filled with anger. We can deal with it in time, Jaime. We can let time guide us through this, but he's a boy we've failed. Me, Jerian, you. At that, Jenna noticed Jaime's head drop. You will spar with him tomorrow. Talk to him, she insisted, turning to leave the room. I don't know if I can, Jaime's voice followed her as she reached the door. You can and you will. Fix this, Jaime. Then prepare for Tyrion's return. He's going to need us, all of us, his family, our family. And Jon is just as much a part of it as he is, she said before stepping out. Later that night, she spoke to Jerian, who agreed with her. He admitted he had tried to find the right words but struggled. Jenna reassured him that no grand speech was necessary, just talk to the boy. At dinner that night, both Jerian and Jenna made an effort. Joy sat at the table, smiling for most of the evening. Jenna even caught her looking over with a nod of approval. The next morning, Jenna woke early, annoyed by Emmon's loud snoring. As she left her room, she heard the sound of blades clashing and voices rising. She walked to the window and looked down to see Jon and Jaime sparring. A smile crept across her face as she turned to head to the kitchen. Her family was hurting, but they would persevere. They would be there for him when he needed them, for both of them. In King's Landing, 294 AC, Littlefinger was pleasantly surprised by a meeting with a man from Pentos. This man represented a cheesemonger, a wealthy magister eager to expand his business and, more importantly, a potential source of coin. When Littlefinger asked for the man's name, he hesitated, explaining that his employer preferred to keep their relationship secure before revealing his identity. Peter had no issue with that. He was more than eager to get to work on the extra coin this man could provide, especially with the hints about the magister's true intentions. My employer is a private man, Lord. Baelish, a wealthy man, had grown disillusioned with the bankers in Bravos. He was seeking a new way to invest his coin, perhaps even considering becoming a banker himself. Does your employer really believe he's wealthy enough to compete with the Iron Bank? My employer sees opportunities that the Iron Bank overlooks. That's how he built his fortune, after all. Did you think cheese alone brought him his riches? This could be the start of something much needed, both for the realm and for himself. Baelish had gathered some wealth while in King's Landing, enough to buy influence and secure potential favors down the line. But this was just the beginning. With more coin, he could truly spread his wings, and then the mockingbird would soar high, indeed, very high. My lord, Lord Arryn wishes to speak with you, the guard announced. Baelish nodded, a small smirk crossing his face as he thought about flying high. He made his way to the Tower of the Hand. With the Tullus gone, Jon Arryn had calmed somewhat. Baelish couldn't help but chuckle at how pathetic Arryn had been in trying to steer Cat away from the match with the prince. A few well-placed words and a drunken conversation had filled Edmure's head with enough doubt to undo that concern and raise another. He was so close, he could feel it, almost taste it. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, whispering to himself, "Cat, my sweet cat, my love." "Lord Hand," Baelish said, entering the chamber. "Sit, Peter, please," Jon replied, and Baelish was relieved to see that the man was at least not panicking. "I received a raven from Renly. It seems the meeting went well, though Olenna may pose a problem." "She won't, my lord. Mace is desperate for this match, eager to be tied to the crown. When he finds out about the king's wishes, he'll go behind the withered rose's back." Baelish noticed the grimace on Jon's face at the mention of Cat's daughter and the prince. The old fool just couldn't grasp the concept of a tactical retreat, and Baelish found it amusing. It was hard to believe this man had once led an army. The king had made it clear that the match would happen. All that was left to do was spin the wheel and try something new. I would prefer them tied more directly, Jon said. He moved to interject, but Jon stopped him. Still, as you say, it can be used to our advantage. How you convinced Renly to go for this is still beyond me. You wouldn't want me to reveal all my secrets now, would you, my lord? Jon Arryn laughed heartily. No, no. Though had I not such a dire need of you as Master of Coin, would have named you Master of Whisperers. Jon chuckled again, and he joined in. The old fool should have named him. Rosby was perhaps the worst master they'd ever had. Speaking of coin, Peter. I may have a solution, both temporary and long-term. He shared his thoughts about the Magister and his proposition. The initial taxes and the coin they would receive now could pull them out of a hole, but if they could secure access to more, he could bankroll them for years. This is excellent news, Peter. Excellent. If we can pull this off with Renly, yes, excellent work, my friend. Jon walked back to his room, where he found his man waiting. Gathering his guards, he headed to the brothel, wondering what whispers had come that were so urgent the man had chosen to come to him instead of waiting as usual. My lord, news from the Riverlands, he said, handing him a note. The Blackfish and the silver trout are no longer close. Angry words have been spoken, and the Blackfish has returned to exile. He smiled at that, then accepted a drink that was brought to him. The young lad who carried it had been promoted from whore to servant simply based on what he had done with Renly. Looking back down at the note, he felt an almost overwhelming urge to jump to his feet and cheer. He was so pleased with his planning. He had learned early on, through his own experience, that a man's lips were more easily opened during or after sex than at any other time. He was more likely to express his wants, needs, desires, or fears while. There was something intoxicating about being with a woman or a man, more so than any drink one might find at an inn. He had poured out his heart to her after their intimate moments, declaring his desires while she lay in his arms, her fiery red hair cascading over his chest. This truth had played out with so many others, like Renly, who had his eye on younger boys on the cusp of manhood, boys who were pretty and slim. Then there was Vyman, with his yearning for young girls, a longing that soon threatened to empty his purse. Peter had learned that lips moved far more freely when desire and lust were in the air. He had made it his mission to listen closely, to catch the secrets and stories that flowed from those lips, taking advantage of the tales they shared. Where is the Magister's man? He asked the young lad, who informed him that the man was with Sarah and Lana. As he approached the hole in the wall, he peered into the room, smiling at the sight of the man rolling around on the bed with the two girls. I shall speak to Illyrio, the man said. You two ladies shouldn't be working in a place like this. Come with Jarlath, I shall treat you well. My master's coin spends far better than any other. Peter smiled, savoring the secrets, whispers, and desires that brought him a step closer to his dream, a step closer to her. In Pentos, in the year 294 AC, Oberyn sparred against Daemon and then Obara, feeling his muscles loosen after breaking his fast. He was ready for the day ahead, eager to speak with the former maester they had traveled so far to meet. Alongside Tyrion and a few guards, leaving Illyrio with Daemon, Obara, and others, he made his way to a small, nondescript house. When the door opened, he recognized the man standing before him. He was older now, clean-shaven, but Oberyn remembered him from Dragonstone, though they had never exchanged words or spent time together. The man seemed to recognize him too, but his gaze was fixed on Tyrion, studying his face before. The former maester knelt on the ground, bowing his head as he invited them in. I wondered if one day someone would come. I did not think it would be you, Prince Oberyn. I have but one request, make it clean. We are not here for that, Loamra, Tyrion replied. Though I am curious as to why you would think we would be. The man breathed a sigh of relief. I had thought they sent you. I thought they found me. They? Tyrion asked. My former brothers. You think the Maesters want you dead? Tyrion's brow furrowed as Loamra nodded. They want me dead, my prince. I do not think this, I know it. Why? Because I refuse to be a part of it. I refuse to do their bidding. I am not here to harm people, that is not why I studied for my chains. That is not the life I chose. I am here to help save lives, not to take them. Whose lives did they want you to take? Tyrion pressed, and the Maester looked at him more closely. Your eyes, they are mismatched, he noted, but Tyrion shrugged it off. Whose lives, Maester? The children, the mother, the father, all of them. All of the dragons. They wished them gone, and in the end, they got their way, he said sadly. He then recounted how he had been approached, asked to ensure that no babe was born, or, if possible, to make sure the mother fell too. When he mentioned an illness Rhaegar had suffered as a young man, Oberyn gasped, recalling the news that had swept the realm. They had wished him to perish from that illness, the Maester continued, and sent him the means to do so. But he threw the poison away, refusing to take part, and soon after, he feared for his own life. Why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you let them know? Oberyn asked, anger rising in his voice. I knew little, my prince. No names, no direct contact. I would have died before I spoke. They tried, which is why I ran. Yes, I should have spoken, but fear takes the tongue. Of many brave men, I am not one, Prince Oberyn admitted. I wish you would come back to Westeros with me, to Casterly Rock, Tyrion urged. No, Loamra replied firmly. I have someone who wants to meet you, someone you can help. Marwyn said you'd be of great assistance, as did the Red Priests, Tyrion continued. Oberyn noticed Tyrion shake his head, signaling that they would discuss it later. There's no reason for me to return to Westeros, my lord. No reason at all, Loamra said as he began to walk away. A dragon needs your help, Maester. A dragon prince who will be king. Rhaegar's son lives. Will you abandon him like you did his father? Oberyn pressed, turning Loamra's attention back to him. Aegon died, Loamra said, a hint of sadness in his voice that surprised Oberyn. But Jaehaerys lives, Oberyn replied. In the end, the Maester agreed, and Oberyn realized he had learned many things during his time here, many fascinating insights, including those about Illyrio Mopatis. I know of the cheesemonger. I heal his servants, they speak of him often, Loamra said. I met him at his manse in the east of the city, Oberyn began, but Loamra interrupted him. Illyrio lives in the west. His is the largest manse in Pentos, only Khal Drogo's comes close. He glanced at Tyrion, who seemed equally intrigued. But it was what the Maester said next that captured Oberyn's full attention. I was there not but a few weeks ago, helping his guest, the Targaryen prince. What? Oberyn exclaimed, his voice rising. Prince Viserys was there, and he is still there. He had been hurt badly, but I helped him, and he is recovering, though it will be a long road, Loamra explained. But I thought you said the dragons were gone? Tyrion asked, puzzled. Viserys is no dragon. He is his father's son, just as he has always been, Loamra replied. Oldtown, 294 AC, Marwyn. Being a spy was something he very much enjoyed, trying to unearth the secrets of lesser men while remaining unnoticed. Finding the truth about magic was as thrilling as it was a welcome distraction. Just as exhilarating was the way his plans had been derailed, he could hardly contain his glee when the poison took effect. The fact that it worked so well even surprised him. But it achieved its goal. Theobald, Walgrave, and Ibros were all sidelined, along with a few others. This left the rest of them, including him, to decide on the new Maester of Casterly Rock. Favors, coin, the assistance of some acolytes, even the lending of a private book from his own collection, all of it combined to ensure his choice succeeded. Jardine would be heading to Casterly Rock, and oh, how Theobald and the others would rage when they found out. Archmaester, an acolyte, interrupted, pulling him from his writing. Yes, what is it? He replied, a bit more abruptly than he intended. Archmasters Ambrose and Theobald wished to speak with you. He made his way to the conclave room, fully aware that this was where they would reprimand him for overstepping his bounds. He had played this game many times before, and in truth, he enjoyed these sessions. He relished their attempts to belittle him and his work. Their threats held no weight, as an Archmaester could not be easily dismissed. Stepping into the room, he saw 6 of them seated there. Ambrose and Rhaenys were no friends of his, but he couldn't tell if they were part of a conspiracy or simply useful fools. Peristan also disliked him, but the man was a fool, and so he focused on the others, Theobald and his cronies, Vaelin and Gallard. These 3, along with Ambrose, were the ones he had removed from the selection committee. You asked for me, friends, he said, noting the distaste etched on most of their faces. We did, Maester. I wish for Jardine to be recalled, Ambrose stated firmly. We cannot, he replied, glancing at Ambrose, who then looked to Theobald. He has only just left. If we send riders, we can bring him back, Rhaenys said angrily. He left on one of those ships The Lannisters are so proud of their reputation. If he arrives too quickly, it would reflect poorly on us with such a powerful house, he said, glancing at Ambrose and Rhaenys, who exchanged worried looks. Why are you so eager to see Jardine as Maester, Marwyn? Vaelin asked. I wanted him gone before he earned a nickname from a fool, Marwyn replied, watching as the man spluttered and coughed in response. Enough, Marwyn. You're overstepping your bounds, Gallard warned, locking eyes with him. How? Did I break any rules? Have I not done what each of you has done for your favored maesters? Haven't each of you seen your preferred students rewarded? Marwyn challenged. That's not the point. You know who we wanted to replace Crelin, and you went around us, Marwyn. There will be consequences for this, Theobald said, his voice steady. Marwyn smiled at him. Every action has a reaction. I understand that. Now, if this is all, my work calls. Magic, don't you just love it? He whistled as he strolled out of the room, feeling certain about Theobald, Vaelin, and Gallard. The other 3 remained uncertain, but he knew who to avoid. In the following weeks, they did their best to undermine him, cutting his supplies and limiting his access to funds. He had to give the Lannisters credit, a man wouldn't go hungry when he was in their favor. The dwarf had listened and made preparations, ensuring he had access to coin through the brothel, a connection he was grateful for. When they tried to take his acolytes, he outmaneuvered them at their own game. Rules were a great asset in an organization founded upon them, and he used those rules to his advantage. After some time, things began to return to a semblance of normalcy. Archmaester, Archmaester. A shaky voice interrupted his thoughts. I was wondering if I could be taken on as an acolyte. Magic, you see, it's most fascinating to me. He turned to face the newcomer. Marwyn turned to look at the owner of the voice, wondering if this was yet another one of Theobald's pathetic attempts to place one of his own acolytes close to him. If someone were to choose a spy, however, the boy in front of him would be an intriguing choice. He was overweight, excessively so, with a face flushed either from exertion or sheer embarrassment. Marwyn couldn't quite tell which. What's your name, boy? He asked. Samwell Tarly, the boy replied. As they continued their journey back to his manse in Pentos, Marwyn reflected on the meeting with the prince. It had been interesting, especially with the prospect of Dornish support and the Golden Company. If the circumstances were right, yes, it could be quite intriguing. He envisioned building ties with them for the future, ready to bring Aegon to their attention when the time was right, a married Aegon and Daenerys, perhaps even joining them with Viserys. Yes, this could work out very well. However, upon arriving back at the manse, he sensed that something had gone terribly wrong. Something had happened, something he had not been prepared for. He moved from his palanquin as quickly as he could, though his girth slowed him down considerably. His Unsullied surrounded him protectively while their captain took some men to check the area for threats. "It is safe to go inside," the captain said, and they entered quickly. What he found inside left him furious. How could they allow this? How could they have been so foolish? As his steward explained the situation, he felt his breathing quicken, his chest expanding with frustration. "They were left in the treasure room," he exclaimed, the steward confirming where he had found the two Unsullied. He hurried down the hall, waddled quickly, his body moving faster than it had in years, his own weight almost causing him to stumble. Looking into the treasure room, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. His fortune was still intact, but more importantly, what lay within this room were the things he held most dear, Sarah's belongings. The jewels remained untouched, but his own bag was missing. Looking around, he screamed in rage as the realization of what had been taken hit him. "The guards! The guards on duty, strip them and bring them to me," he commanded. His Unsullied obeyed, bringing forth the guards and his steward. "On your knees," he ordered. He watched as the two Unsullied, the guard he had stationed at the princess's room, the two patrolling guards, and the steward all knelt before him. Staring at them, he spat on the floor in front of them and motioned to his captain. "Cut their throats. Please, master." "I have served you for 20 years, his steward pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "You failed me." As he walked away, he heard the guards scream and the steward's cries echoing in the air, though the Unsullied remained silent. That night, he sought comfort in food and took out his frustrations on the girls, but despite their efforts, he found himself unable to rise to the occasion. Frustrated, he sent them away and ate even more before falling asleep at the table, his head resting on a suckling pig. The next morning, he called the girls in to wash and perfume him, broke his fast, and sent for his man in the city. When the man arrived, he issued his orders. The capture was no longer the priority. "Kill them and return my property. Return the eggs to their rightful master." They had stolen Aegon's birthright, the gift he had planned to present on the boy's wedding day. They had crossed a line, and for that, he would show no mercy to the dragons. "The prince, does he know?" "No, master." "Good. See to it that he is dosed from now on, every day," he instructed, and his captain left to carry out the order. He had no choice now, only one option, to ensure his son sat on the throne he was born to inherit. He would spend his entire fortune if necessary, every last coin. He wrote out the contract for the Golden Company, calculating in his head how much coin he had left. Then he rose and walked to the. As he entered the prince's room and saw him lying there asleep, he nearly succumbed to the urge to strike him down right then and there. But no, he would heal the boy prince. He would ensure his recovery because the prince was the key, the final piece in his grand plan. The right coin could earn him a king's favor, and Viserys would help him gain the trust he needed. He glanced down at the locket, opened it, and gazed at her face, her beautiful face. "As I swore, so it shall be, my love," he vowed softly.